All right, good afternoon, everyone. So today is the Wednesday, November 27th. This is our regular board meeting, second in the month. So I'll call to order right at 1:30. So our meeting today is being conducted principally on the territories of the Hoop-Hatchet and the Tashonk First Nations, and I'd like to recognize and appreciate that fact. However, our meeting is a hybrid meeting, however, so we'll have our directors as well as maybe some staff coming in from different traditional territories, most of which will be on Nuu-chah-nulth territory. Because our meeting is in a hybrid format, we do have people who are in the boardroom today, as well as people who are online. We'll go around counterclockwise and have people introduce themselves in the room, and then we'll go online. I'll just call out your first name or something like that. So if you want to start, Heather, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services.
I'm very disappointed we're inside on such a sunshiny, beautiful day, but we're here and we're going to have fun. Debbie Haggard, appointed representative from the City of Port Alberni and Vice Chair of the Regional District Board.
I'm Randy LaCourcier, and I'm the alternate for Sprout Lake.
I'm Mike Sparrow, and I represent Cherry Creek.
Good afternoon, everyone. Booth Clam Mariah Coots for the Ho-chunk-o-sit-chunk Government Clicko.
Good afternoon, Fred Boyko, Regional Area Director for Beaufort.
Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Siam, the CAO for the ACRD, not E.
Thank you. And Oklama Sayachat, Hishtukshit Lahoet. My name is John Jack. I'm the director for the Williet First Nations, as well as the chairperson. And we'll start online. So we'll start with Susan. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan Roth, and I'm the director for Beaver Creek.
Thank you. And Veda.
Veda Sega, director for Area C, Long Beach.
And Bob.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bob Beckett, representing Bamfield Area A. And if you don't mind, send some of that sunshine down my way, please.
Thank you. And Lavana.
Good afternoon, Lavana Mastrangelo, executive member from Ucluelet First Nation. Thank you.
My mistake, Lavana. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
And Marilyn, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Marilyn McEwen, Director for the District of Ucluelet.
Great. And Kirsten?
Afternoon, Kirsten Johnson, Director for the Tokwat Nation.
And Tom?
Yes, good afternoon. Tom Steer, appointed Director, District of Tofino.
And finally, Shari.
Good afternoon, Shari Minions, Mayor for the City of Port Alberni.
Okay, I think that's it. If we could have staff on the other side there, but yeah, please introduce yourselves.
Yeah, we thought we got out of this round. Good afternoon. It's Jenny Brunn. I'm the General Manager of Community Services.
And hi there, I'm Alex Dyer. I'm the Planning Manager. Thank you.
And Shane, your video's on. You might as well introduce yourself.
Shane Corn, Manager of Financial Services with the ACRD.
Great. And I think that's it. We have some folks in the gallery, although they don't have to introduce themselves. So we can move on to the next item. So the approval of the agenda today is slightly modified with a new piece of material. For those of you here in the boardroom today, it'll be with your packages. It has been posted on the website online, and it may have been emailed as well, but I haven't checked the email lately. All right, does anyone have a motion to put forward for them? Thank you, Director Boyko.
I would like to add something to the agenda.
Okay, go ahead.
We had a very severe weather event over the past week. Started 8 days ago. It affected everybody basically in this room and everybody online. Some places were without power for 4 or 5 days. Basically Bamfield, Ucluelet, Tofino, Beaver Creek, Beaufort, everybody else. So I just want to have a quick discussion on what we learned, lessons learned, and what we witnessed. Thank you.
Cool. I would suggest that we do a roundtable as a part of late business. So we can put that as 12A. And since that's an addition, we'll add it to the agenda as amended. Did anyone like to speak to that or move the agenda as amended? Go ahead, Director Haggard.
I'd like to approve the agenda as amended.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Coots. Any further comments? Okay, once again, we have one piece of new information for one of the planning items, as well as a new item for 12A, which we'll call Weather Event Roundtable. All those in favor? All opposed? A motion carried. Thank you. Good suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Blanco. Okay, does anyone have any declarations of conflicts of interest, perceived conflicts of interest, or gifts exceeding $250 of value? Normally, this is for planning matters. Sometimes a decision, but usually not. Going once. Okay, I think we're all in good shape. That brings us to the adoption of minutes. 4A is the Board of Director meeting minutes for November 13th, 2024. Dr. Haggard, go ahead.
I'd like to move that the minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on November 13th, 2024 be adopted.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, the next item is the ACRD Emergency Executive Committee, November 6th, 2024. Would anyone like to move that? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Seconded by Director Siga. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. All right, we have two more. Item C is the Agriculture Development Committee meeting minutes from November 12th, 2024. Anyone like to move adoption? Thank you, Director Boyko. Seconded by Dr. Sparrow. Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. All right, item D, the last item in minutes, is the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Committee dated November 14th, 2024. Susan, do you want to move this? Okay, moved by Director Roth. Any further comments? Any seconders? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. All righty, we're trucking along pretty quickly here. We're on item 5A. I'd like to introduce Mr. Sylvain Levert, as well as potentially his person with him. I don't know how to pronounce your name though. Aswin, would you like to introduce yourself? Should be in the lower left. We're on Zoom, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, thank you for allowing us to present in this meeting. My name is Ashwin. I am a program analyst at Transport Canada, coming to you from Ottawa, and I'll give it over to Sylvain. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Sylvain.
Thanks, Ashwin, and thanks you for allowing us to share a few minutes here with you to speak to the Ports Asset Transfer Program. I do have a presentation. I don't know if it's preferable that I try to present it, or I can speak to it and share it with the council after the fact. It's really up to what you prefer, what the typical.
Yeah, normally we have 10 minutes for presentations and delegations, so that can include your presentation and what you say. Any questions, comments, don't add to that. So I think we're okay. If you would share your screen, I think everyone would benefit from that. So please go ahead.
That's great. And just so we are calling from Ottawa, and the sun's already set in terms of the weather. So, hang on, let me see if I can sort this out. Is this showing on screen now?
Look like it is. Is he set to share, Janice? Is he able to?
Yeah, you should be able to share, Sylvain.
So there's a share button on Zoom. You hit that first, and then you share either the screen or the window.
Oh, wait.
There you go.
There we go. Now do we see a presentation?
Yep, starting up now.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, thank you. Please go ahead.
In the interest of time, I'll just try to scroll through. It's not a very long presentation, and as we mentioned, any of the sort of annexes or the whole thing we can share. But The concept here was to, and we've already started sort of some discussions about the port facilities at Bamfield West, and it's, I guess the purpose here is to solicit and seek your support and continuing those discussions, because we feel it's a really worthwhile initiative, and we kind of want to walk you through essentially what the process is and how it works and how it can be of benefit to the community in the end. From a history perspective, you know, the Transport Canada has been working towards getting out of the business of owning and operating facilities such as these. And it's partially because it no longer has this mandate to carry on the operations, which is a result of like a 1995 policy decision, which is called the National Marine Policies, to really work towards, you know, transferring these to entities, the local users that are generally better used or better positioned to manage these instead of Transport Canada. So at first there were about 549 of these facilities. There's 33 of these left, which includes the facilities at Bamfield West. And our intention is to really to continue to work with your folks to explore how the Ports Asset Transfer Program works. There is no mandate to operate these from Transport Canada's position. And at the same time, we do recognize the importance the facilities would have to local communities. And so the idea would be really to see how this works and, you know, to carry on this the initiative to explore how a local community could take on the facilities. Generally speaking, there's, you know, phases to the exploration. So we've already got the formalized interest and, you know, the letter of intent and a disclosure agreement, which allows us to info share with the team that's more on the ground looking at how this could work. Once that's established, the next step, which is where the regional district kind of is to submit a request for pre-transfer funding. Now, the idea here is that we would never want to explore, or we wouldn't want to transfer one of these facilities without being certain that, you know, due diligence was conducted and that people that are acquiring the facilities know what they're getting into. The last thing we want to do is to, you know, precipitate this and have an outcome which is unsatisfactory both to us and to the acquiring party. I want to make it clear from the get-go is that the idea isn't for us to transfer this at the lowest price possible and, you know, try to get rid of an asset that's depreciated and in terrible condition. The idea really is for us to work collaboratively and see how our funding program can help the community overall in terms of acquiring the facilities, knowing what it's getting itself into, and then, you know, moving forward with it. So once the pre-transfer funding is taken care of, that's that due diligence phase. So there's a lot of engineering, environment, a business case is put together for how, you know, an acquiring party could manage this. The proposal itself is what is the outcome that we would, you know, review and approve. And then, you know, the whole concept at that stage is to really say, okay, well, if this transfer were to materialize, you know, how can we both work together to ensure that the financial parameters that we're working from align with, you know, the needs of the community according to the program parameters themselves, which we'll get into in a couple of minutes. So as I mentioned, you've already done this. There's a letter of an interest and a disclosure agreement, which is fine. And then that just makes, you know, the disclosure of agreement is just so that we don't broadcast information which could jeopardize the negotiation process and any future contracting. That's really what it's all about. But it's designed, the program is designed so that when we get into these discussions, it's as transparent as it possibly can be. That's the idea. Pre-transfer funding, as I mentioned, it's really to get those due diligence studies done, and there should be no cost to an acquiring party to get them done. We typically see acquiring parties go outside and get contracts done that have firms that would do, you know, the engineering and the environmental assessments, put together whatever feasibility studies. You know, there's a cost. You can get reimbursed, or you know, the cost for administrative or professional services can be covered. There's always going to be community and engagement as part of this process. And then, of course, because it's a real property transaction, there's going to be some legal documentation if you get to that stage. And it's really important to also recognize that even if there is pre-transfer funding, there's an agreement that binds that. There is no commitment from an acquiring party to get into the actual transfer agreement. You can always back out. There's no commitment from that side. But the idea is to really explore what it can do and how it all works, because there's, you know, funding available. So, and again, we'll share anything we can with you if any of this is unclear. The most important part is going to be, because it's a transfer, there's there's funding provided. Now, the way this program is set up is that we operate on the concept called the Crown No Worse Off. So it would be like if the transfer were to materialize, or no, sorry, if the funding envelope tied to a transfer is based on what Transport Canada foresees as its cost would be across 25 years, and then that bucket of money, say, is transferred to an acquiring party in one lump sum payment. So it recognizes that there are future costs. It's by no means eternal money, but it's a one-shot payment. But there's very little strings tied to it, other than, you know, as long as the funds are expended against eligible expenditures, which pretty much means against what the transfer plate was, or what the asset was transferred, and it's reasonable, that's fine. So it's a modeling though. So we would look at internally, like, you know, what is a reasonable cost that TC would have expended if it's an operating or an open port, which Banfield is. We'd look at salary, you know, sort of any major minor maintenance, you know, activities across the 25 years. And then we model that to turn it into a lump sum payment. Had it been a closed facility, then you're looking at just, you know, the cost of demolition to remove TC from that footprint. And then the rest is just details. It's just the way the modeling is set up so that, you know, the Crown doesn't execute a project and pay you to do the work in terms of the financial envelope. But that's the nutshell. And there's a slide later on that when we share it, it actually details all of the little inputs to the Crown No Worse Off model. Of course, because it's a real property transaction. If you get there, there's legal documents, which they're all templates, but you want to have them reviewed. And then, you know, for the moment, the status of the facility is that the only sort of work that TC will carry out on the facilities are to ensure the safety of users. So because of that, that's, you know, the transfer takes place in the as-is condition, but the monetary amount reflects that. So, and because typically or almost guaranteed, an acquiring party can make that dollar stretch much more than what TC would be able to in terms of executing a project in advance. It's a preferable mechanism to take the money and then execute the work and manage the money as an acquiring party than it is to for TC to execute work on behalf of. And besides, there's no mandate, nor do I have any funding available for any of these type of large scale maintenance or, you know, recapitalization of those assets. It doesn't. In fact, I would even go as far as to say that in the world of granted contributions, I can provide more funding for this one facility than we get for across like all of the 33 facilities that are left on an annual basis. So the note on environment, there's that every port facility has some form of environmental liability. There can be, there's an environmental assessment that's done. If it qualifies in terms of, you know, TC's responsibility for environmental remediation, there's a recognition for that as part of the funding envelope. And then there's the other line is just about if there's a transfer that takes place and the acquiring party then sells or disposes of it after that transfer, there's a mechanism in place that you can allow it, but there are sometimes clawback or payback mechanisms for that to be taken into consideration. So I know that's probably a lot of little bits of information, but it is essentially how the program is structured and whatnot. Where we're at today is kind of broken down in these sort of steps. So you're really at stage one because we have the letter of intent and the disclosure signed off. We want to move into the second part, which is that due diligence and setting that up, which will require, you know, sort of a project team or a few resources to work through that. And of course, the pre-transfer funding, if you want it, is available, and we have the funding available under our, you know, reference levels today, which is good. Typically, and this kind of goes against what was in that first slide, but it's not as, you know, sequential. But if we get into the due diligence and pre-transfer, what we want to try to do early is to establish what that what TC's perspective is on the financial contribution. So we would put off a monetary offer early enough that allows, you know, at least it provides direction as to what the total bucket amount of money would look like. And then after that, it's continuing, you know, due diligence and, you know, working towards that port proposal, and then whatever other provincial authorities are required, we would work with you to do that. And like the fundamental to all of this is that, you know, Ashwin and I and our director, David, who was there a couple of weeks ago, we would support you through the entire way as best we can. But it's really about, you know, creating a bit of that relationship, but showing you exactly what, you know, how the program parameters work, what these costs are, what the risks are, and hoping that, you know, that transfer would materialize. There is funding available that we have through budget 2024 for both pre-transfer and actually at transfer. But that funding, just like any other program, is not here forever. So we do hope, and we would like to, you know, work with you to get through whatever phases we can, so that, you know, if this is viable, we'd love to explore it with you. So I think that's probably close to 10 minutes, if not slightly over. So I will say thank you for taking the time to listen, and we're happy to answer questions now or at any time. We're always available for that.
Thank you. Can you stop sharing just so I can see the screen a bit better? Thank you. Yeah, just a bit over time, but I saw that you were pretty close to the end. So we'll open up questions and comments. So we'll have Director Steer and then maybe others as we go. Thank you, Director Boyko. Here, I'm going to write this down. So Director Steer, Director Boyko, and then Director Beckett. So please go ahead, Director Steer.
Great, thank you. And through the chair, thank you for the presentation, Sylvain. And just for full disclosure, at the District of Tofino, we've gone through this divestiture process a long time ago, and currently we have an appointed director on our harbor authority where the Small Craft Harbors is looking at the divestiture program of a number of our non-core assets here. I do have, I will be speaking a lot more when it comes up on the agenda item later on, but in terms of a question for you, at this point, just for clarity, as part of divestiture, one of the potentials for is to have the petition the federal government to have the Bamfield dock removed from the disposition list. And I'm just curious because the reality is there are a lot of obligations, long-term obligations with the divestiture of such an asset to a small regional or local government. And so I'm concerned about a few things, but one question I do have around that potential petition. What is the process in terms of going through that petitioning the federal government to have us to potentially have the West Bamfield dock removed from that disposition list?
It's an excellent question, and I don't really know the answer to be perfectly transparent, because we don't deal with that. But I'm certain that you would have to engage with your regional or your local member of parliament. That's usually the first door in, and you write the letter up that says, "Oh, we believe that this should remain an asset for all these reasons," and the community relies, and that kind of thing. It will eventually just, in all transparency, again, it comes back to us to kind of draft a response to it, and whether or not the minister agrees. I mean, it's definitely it's always an option to do that. I just, with the history and with with the general direction from the 1995 to today, I'm not sure what the likelihood of success would be in doing that, because we're not, generally we're not moving towards retaining these. We're really moving towards, the divestiture side. So, but I would for sure encourage you to do, whatever the regional district feels is right for itself, and that's fine. But I think to me, it's always the first door is for your local member of parliament, who then will, either forward this on or whatnot. But if there is an actual other petition process, I'm not 100% sure. We can maybe look into it and get back to the regional district on it. But
thank you. We have a good relationship with our member of parliament, so thank you for the heads up on that potential course of action.
All right, thank you. I have Director Boyko, Director Beckett, and then Director Siga. So please go ahead, Director Boyko.
Thank you, Chair. I got about 5 questions here. So we had representatives here a couple weeks ago. We've already signed a letter of intent. Did that not come to the board first before we signed a letter of intent, or?
I can answer that. No, we signed that just to set the table so we could have the information to actually bring to the board.
Okay, second question. We do not have any docks right now. Are we moving into the dock business? Are we going to hire new staff? Are we going to have a whole new service? Do we have any experience with docks, etc.? Why did we not go to the Port Alberni Port Authority with this? Because they are the local people that deal with docks.
So the exchange was brought to us from Transport Canada, and it's not that there aren't options to explore, but really what we want to do is come to the board and say, should we be exploring this? So those are all options that we can add into the feasibility, but right now we haven't done any of that because we want to make sure the board actually wants to proceed in a specific direction.
Okay, thank you. I feel that we're adding a whole bunch of stuff onto our service and people. And I don't think we should be moving into the dock business. What about the East Dock in Banfield? Who owns and runs that one? Government one.
So the Banfield East Dock has actually been transferred, 2013 or thereabouts, maybe 2014 to Huet. And then we transferred most of the management control to one of our businesses.
So if Huet already has experience doing that, why are we bringing ACRD into Banfield to do something that is already existing management to do?
Yeah, Director Beckett might have some context in regards to the Banfield scenario, but I think Huet had a chance to have it transferred to them, but we didn't feel as connected to the West Banfield side of things, so we balked at that. But this is a conversation that can be had here. We're pretty neutral on that. Daniel, go ahead.
If I can jump ahead of Director Beckett on that one too. The early discussions that we had with Director Beckett and Transport Canada was just around the value the West Dock has for the West Banfield community. And you know, really when we were exploring how it is or what it is that we should be doing, prior to bringing it to the board, we wanted to frame what this would look like, but we also wanted to be clear in terms of this is a vital piece of infrastructure for Banfield. There's key services coming to that community that only arrive via this dock. And so when you look at the options for divestiture, where it could be community owned and operated, or it could be private, the preference here in discussions with Director Beckett was, hey, let's bring it to the board, because even if we say no, we at least want to be in a position where we're bringing information to the community and have them in a position to say, okay, like, yes, we do want it under these conditions, or no, we don't want it. And we accept that there's a risk that it could be divested to private interest. That's in the hands of Transport Canada.
Thank you. Final question. After a 25-year period, assuming the funding does match the required maintenance of this facility, who's going to be paying for it at that point? Thank you.
On that one, this is what ultimately, if we were to take this on, if we went through feasibility and we decided that we were going to take on the dock, then it would be our dock. Now, I say that could be any shape, right? Like it could be purely ACRD. It could be a consortium of the ACRD with other governments, maybe with Huet or their business, their corporate entity. It could be a whole sequence of different collaborative sort of structures that would own it. That would all be part of a feasibility. And the reason why later on in the staff report, where we say we would like to actually proceed with the feasibility, is that we have more questions than we have answers. And that just doesn't lead to a good decision right now. So what we'd like to do is make sure that we go get the funding from Transport Canada, equip ourselves to add that to our work plan for 2025, and get some answers and work with the community so we can be in a position to make an informed decision.
Which staff's going to be involved with that? Is that planning staff or something else?
Right now it's primarily in my desk, and I'd like to get it off. So it would be, in my vision, it would be planning staff. However, we have a number of different options that Sylvain identified, and those options would be articulated during our budget process. Like we do our proposed initiative cases, as we typically do, and in there we'd have, these are the different approaches that we could take to minimizing the amount of staff time and maximizing the amount of contract time.
Okay, final note, then I'll let it go. If we are going to use planning staff, I think the opinion of everybody in this valley and all the agricultural producers would be to work on the ACRD bylaw amendments with regard to Agricultural Land Commission, as opposed to a dock in Banfield as priority. But that'll be a discussion for later. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Good questions, Dr. Blayko. I have Dr. Beckett and then Dr. Siga next. Dr. Beckett, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was going to initially just simply defer to Daniel to give the 30,000 foot perspective on the discussions that we've been having over the last almost 2 years that I've been involved, when the first private enterprise came to me and said that they were thinking or interested in securing the dock. And I immediately went to Daniel to identify my concerns about losing what I saw was a community asset to private enterprise, albeit that's not to say that that couldn't happen. And as a result of that initial conversation, as Daniel alluded to, we found out that there were more questions than there were answers as we started to look at what did this mean if this dock was to if we were to lose this dock as a community asset. And as we've gone further in this, we've learned a lot more about the funding aspect. And I recognize and appreciate that the Valley has concerns, as does the West Coast with their own initiatives. But I can tell you that this matter is extremely important to the community of Bamfield, and we have to get it right. Whether we use our MP and our federal politicians to determine that we don't want the federal government to give it back or to get rid of it, or whether we want to consolidate with a consortium. These are all things that we have to be very careful and get the answers. And to Transport Canada's credit, staff have been very transparent, very supportive, very patient with us in helping us move forward, especially with respect to securing the funding, if this board agrees, securing the federal funding that will allow us to bring the professionals in that will ensure that the community of Bamfield is protected in making the right decision. So I'm going to stop there, but I can tell you that we all have things as directors that we feel are critical and important to our community. This is one of them, and I'm extremely confident that we are taking the appropriate path forward. It was time to bring it back to the board for open discussion. It's time to bring it back to the community of Bamfield to let them know the hard work that's gone into this to this date, and the support that we're getting from staff, both in the ACRD and especially at Transport Canada's level. So I'll stop there. This is not a flash in the pan matter. This is going to take months, if not longer, for us to follow a path that will allow the community and the board to make the right decision on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Siga, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep, all good.
Thanks. Of course, I believe that decisions around important infrastructure should be closer to the users. And just historically, there have been incidents with government docks where abuses are happening, and there isn't a real clear way to report. So I think this is a really positive thing in that we're going to have more say in some of our own assets and transportation. I have a couple questions for Sylvain. What would you see as a benefit in terms of monetary income from ownership of this dock? And if a federal vessel was to use that dock, is there a payment for the use of that dock from the federal vessels?
Great question. I think in my opinion, there are a lot of benefits from local ownership, and it's much. To be frank, Transport Canada is not a great manager of these assets because it's not designed to be responsive and to changing or whatever needs. And I'm not saying that to call out our operational colleagues, not at all. It's just not set up for that. with the ownership, what happens really is that it's an outright sale or transfer or whatever. So it becomes property of the acquiring party. So if it decides to want to charge vessels, whether it be federal, provincial, or anyone, you can do that in terms of the utilization of that facility as the community sees fit, or the operating party sees fit. So it's really about taking the facilities, doing something with them that resembles what the community wants them to do, making sure we're trying the best to make sure that, you know, the funding provided can last as long as it possibly can, and that there's a bit of a business structure that underpins that to make it, you know, as perennial as possible, given what the asset is. It's residing in saltwater. Like, there are risks to that, but it's understanding them and doing, you know, what we can with them, or what the acquiring party can with them. So once it's gone, it's no longer Transport Canada, other than the typical, you know, navigation routes or whatnot. There's no direction as to what the acquiring party has to do with it, outside of typically a 3-year window. And that's something we can negotiate later on or whatnot. But normally we typically say, well, the way it's been run recently should persist for about 3 years to allow a transition from the, you know, users or the community members from what's today to what the intention is. Doesn't mean you can't charge whatever it is you want to charge, but there has to be a bit of a transition just to soften any radical blow to, you know, usage. Does that answer?
It looks like we have Director Roth up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My question's to Sylvain. When was the dot built?
That's an excellent question, and I don't have it handy, but it's got to be Ashwin, do you have that somewhere just handy? The actual initial construction date? Like, we have it in our inspection reports, because I always refer back to it, but I don't have it. But we could probably get it in the next couple of seconds here if you just give us a bit of time. But
I'm also curious about the actual purpose. Like, why did the Canadian federal government chose to build one there? What was the intent?
That we may not be able to, because it predates us, obviously. But at some point there was a thrust to, you know, for commercial activities across the country. So a lot of these facilities were built just so that, you know, there could be a commercial access of some sort to develop whatever local areas would be. In this particular case, we'd have to see if we can find an actual historical, like, you're talking at least 60 or 70 years ago, I think, for that decision to itself to have been made. But it had to be for, you know, really it's about expanding commercial activities across the country, and maybe seen as a federal responsibility back then because there was money and an authority to do so. But that's what's sort of been scaling back since mostly the 1990s. But we could probably get that number, or what the original construction year was. At least we could get that to you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Director Steer.
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. Just to Director Roth, just to give you some insight on to why those docks were created in the first place. It came under legislation back in the 1970s for commercial fishing. So small craft harbors were created to support the commercial fishing sector, and the vast majority of those docks across British Columbia specifically, but also in the rest of Canada, were created to support the commercial fishing industry. And that was the intent of most of the small craft harbors that were created on the coast. So that's where the historical background for those particular operations stand. And they still stand. That legislation still holds to this day in terms of commercial fishing as the #1 priority for those small craft harbor docks within federal purview.
Correct. And if I could just add, I guess that's when there was a split between the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, which is why it's no longer a Transport Canada priority, or like a asset. For the most part, they would have been transferred to DFO and to maintain the commercial fishing aspect. And the ones that don't really have that vocation, maybe that's why they're still sitting with transport, which makes sense.
All right, thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions for Sylvain and Ashwin? Seeing none, on behalf of the board, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and the comments and questions we had. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so that brings us through the end of item 5. And that brings us into correspondence for information, as there is no correspondence for action. Would anyone like to pull anything out of the correspondence for information? I don't see anyone. Would anyone like to receive the information? Thank you, Director Boyko, seconded by Director Siga. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Great. All right, that brings us into item 8. 8A is a request for a decision regarding the East Bamfield sewer ascent vote. Please go ahead, Cynthia. I think you're up on this one. Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So as you're all aware, we did have the 2 referendums for East and West Bamfield for the sewer collections system service. So this is one of the final steps in the referendum, is to have the following reports. And one is the declaration of official assent vote results and the determination of official assent vote results. So the 2 advanced voting opportunities were held in Bamfield, the first in East Bamfield on November 6th, and the second was held in West Bamfield on November 13th. And the official voting day was held in East Bamfield on November 16th. So with this referendum, we saw a high number of ballots cast using all voting opportunities, including mail-in ballots, and a high voter turnout overall. So the determination and declaration of official election results were conducted by myself, the Chief Election Officer, and the presiding election official on Wednesday, November 20th. And the electors voted against the adoption of bylaw number E1065, East Bamfield Sewer Collection System Service Establishment Bylaw, and bylaw number F1163, East Bamfield Sewer Collection System Loan Authorization Bylaw. So the voter turnout, so it was 8 voted in favor and 59 voted against. So with 88.06% voting against the service. So as these bylaws did not receive the required consent of the electorate within the service area, they will not be forwarded to the Board of Directors for consideration of adoption, and the East Bamfield Sewer Collection Service will not be established. So we're looking for the recommended motion to receive the reports.
Thank you, Cynthia. Bob, would you like to move that?
Absolutely. With thanks to our community for their involvement, participation, and of course to staff who did an exceptional job over a number of months. The motion is that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors receive the 2024 Declaration of Official Assent Vote results and determination of the official assent vote results for East Bamfield Sewer Collection System Service.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Siga. Any further comments? Go ahead, Director Boyko.
Yes, thank you very much. So I got a total spending on this whole project of over 130,000. Is that about right? So 20,000 for the referendum. That was 10,000, but ended up 20,000 plus 12,000 cost plus 100 grand for the consultant. Is that about right?
I don't have those right at my fingertips. I can look it up in Questica. That seems a bit high. The project was funded under the community works funding, but that's not what you're asking for. So if you give me a minute, I can probably look up the
Perfect
totals.
So this is a referendum that is about as definitive as possible on both sides. So looking back, we need to look at how we started this in the first place, because did we create a solution to a problem that didn't exist? And the people out there decided very definitively that we do not want a sewer system. Is this something that was going to be looked at again in 10 years, 20 years? Some of the wording, I got one more question. Some of the wording in the presentations were business as usual is no longer an option for using sewer systems moving forward. Things like this. So we have to make sure we're very clear on the message that we're sending to people during the presentation, that over the past year that we've said sewer systems are no longer an option in the writing here, things like that. Thank you. I got one more question after that.
So before I go to anybody else, so the background on the sewer system originates with Huayet and the work that we've been doing with the Banfield Marine Science Center. So the sewer system itself was a project that was done primarily on behalf of Huayet, and we received federal funding to build the thing. We worked with the Banfield Marine Science Center in order to find a place where the outfall could go in the right place. This was about Huayet growing, and this is about Huayet's objectives. This isn't something that the ACRD was trying to foist on Banfield. This was something that Huayet was giving Banfield the option to link into. And so I'm a bit disappointed in quite a bit of the rhetoric that was online, especially from certain individuals who are well known to the Banfield community, because it was an option. Because Huayet is looking to invest heavily in not only its own village, but also its holdings in Banfield itself. We are investing in Banfield. We are investing in growth. So I think part of the rhetoric in regards to kind of it's not going to change is that's not going to be the case. We are looking to invest over $100 million with investors in our holdings in Banfield and the Anakla area. Things will happen as a result of all that Huayet is doing. And so this wasn't something that Daniel wanted to do. This wasn't something that Jenny wanted to do. This wasn't something that Bob wanted to do. Bob agreed to ask the question and ask that the board entertain the question on a relationship building basis. I don't know how all the conspiracy theory stuff started, but we should have had two things at play. First of which is that we could have communicated more clearly that intent. And second of which is to quote Ted Lasso, individuals should have been curious, not judgmental. And so I'm really concerned about the relationship building aspect here. And I know that Bob is too. He thought it was a long shot at the very beginning, but he wanted to give the option just in case, especially given what was going on with the framework plan. We wanted to give Banfield residents the option to link in now because now will be the cheapest time to do it. The facility is already built. The outfall is already built. It's only going to go up in the future. So that was part of the opportunity here. So this is not something that was a conspiracy. This was not something that was seen as must happen, will happen. This was an option that Bob took time to talk to me about and go, there's a low chance of this happening, but it is still worthwhile in doing. So that's what I got. And so what we should have done perhaps is communicate more fully those intents, because this is something that the sewer system's still going to be there. We're still going to move forward with what's going on. And so, yes, it did cost money to ask the question, but part of that is relationship building with Huayet. And so I don't know how you put a value on that, but this is something that I think from my perspective, Bob was willing to put to the people so that there was an answer that wasn't led by just him, right? So it was definitive, but I think people were not fully informed as to the intent and as to whether or not it was nefarious, and I don't think it was. So with that in mind, I'll leave it to Bob, and if there's any more comments or questions afterwards, that's fine. But from the Huayet perspective, it's a shame that it won't happen, but the sewer system's already there. So it will still be something that Huayet's businesses link into, and whatever we build will link into that because we needed to see it. So did you want to follow up? Yeah. One more question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and great explanation as well. If it had been clearly communicated, I was paying attention to it for various reasons, but when it came down to the wording of sewer system regulation and maintenance bylaw in the stuff that would apply to the entire ACRD area, and everyone around here all has sewer systems and septic systems. So when that wording came up in the presentation materials, that piqued my interest. Is that something that the ACRD is looking at doing right now? I also sat through the 1 hour presentation on how to report your neighbor for their septic system as well. So that was, I don't want to say an implied threat, but that was something that came out in the talk about that. Why are we putting so much time on having the ability and knowing how to complain on your neighbor's septic field? Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. I don't have a question on that part. Is that something that can be fielded on your end? Go
Well,
ahead.
we pursue what we're directed to pursue. So if you're asking whether there's a great interest across the region to get rid of individual septics, no. Where we explore the options, where we're instructed to explore that option as usually sub-regional. I would never envision in my lifetime an entire region-wide sort of a sewer system or a bylaw that encapsulates the entire region. What we would do, if directed to do so, would be similar to what we've done in Bamfield, where we talk about a sub-regional system for a group of users, a sub-community, or a community, as the case may be, and go down that path. But it always originates at this table, the direction from the board, prior to taking any actions.
So just a quick follow-up. At this time, there is no potential sewerage system regulation, SSR, and maintenance bylaw as what was in the presentation materials to the Bamfield people. Nothing coming up, right?
Not that I'm aware of, unless we're directed to do so. So that's what we have. And with regards to complaints, it's important to flag that residents ask, because there is a concern around the pollution levels caused by outflow directly into the Bamfield Inlet. And so people who are worried about, well, if I know that my neighbor's system doesn't work, what do I do? And it's not the ACRD, it's not our jurisdiction, it's Ministry of Environment. So for us to bridge and say, this is how you submit a complaint, is not us saying go and complain, it's saying this is how. The question was asked, we provided the answer.
So, yeah, and I think just to add some context, and I won't quote the person because it's an individual who could be identified. But there was concerns over, even if this was rejected, there's still concerns over what Huayet and other residents of Bamfield have brought up in regards to concerns about affecting water and things going into the inlet. So I think that was kind of the, well, if we're not going to have the sewer, what's the next step to protect the environment? And so I wouldn't make that too much of a thing, but I can see how that was interpreted though. So like you said, communication is going to be key. And I think in the future, when we talk about potential bylaws or regulations and so on and so forth, the titles of those things become much more specific than they have been. They've been fairly generic, and I think that might be misinterpreted as well. So with that, I think the next one up is Director Beckett. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, for your comments, and thank you for the Ted Lasso quote. I think that has one of the most profound statements regarding this subject matter. You know, I wasn't going to say anything, but I will. I too was very disappointed by the rhetoric and the challenges that I was faced with. And you could say, well, you're an elected official. You need to toughen up. Your skin needs to be tougher. No, I'm looking for a community to have appropriate dialogue that is respectful, that looks for the truths, the facts, so that we can, as a community and eventually as a board, make the appropriate decisions. This was I'll use the term interesting process as opposed to a negative connotation. It was an interesting process that I think the entire board should embrace, simply because there are lessons to be learned from this process. And whether it's the financial aspect of the costs associated with it, or whether it's the type of communications or the processes that we went through to eventually, come to this determination, it's a lesson that we can learn from, so that as we move forward with, other matters of importance to the board for your own communities, whether it's the bylaws or whether it's your OCP, we need to find a way that we can ensure that our community are engaged and that we come up with the right decisions. So moving you know what? I'm going to park the negative stuff and I'm going to go right to the positive stuff. As a fire chief, after every major incident, we critiqued it and we looked to find, well, what did we do well at that call? And what could we learn from that call? And I never backed away from the fact that there's probably something that we could do better the next time. There's a lesson that we can learn. And when I look at this, we hadn't even finished the referendum, and I had reached out to staff and said, I think it's really important that after the referendum, we come together, sit down with the Bamfield Community Affairs Society executive, and let's critique this. Was there a way to evaluate and analyze this earlier? Is there a way to save time and money moving forward? At the same time, how do we ensure the community has all the information moving forward? And the Community Affairs Society executive and staff have agreed that we're going to move forward in that. So I think I'll leave it at that. This is a positive moving forward. The community has spoken. I respect that. And as I said, I appreciate, the vast majority of folks that appreciated the fact that there was an opportunity to make a decision that the whole community will live by. So I'll get off that soapbox. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Director Beckett. I think one thing that's important from a relationship perspective is that we did do a check-in kind of in the midst of all of this with Huu-ay-aht, and it's well understood that this was a long shot to start. What we want to do is establish a pattern of mutual respect of the communities. And so one thing that we need to do is ask questions that can honestly be answered in any way possible. And so that's still our intent moving forward. And I think relationship and community level, like collective trust, is only built by going through these processes and respecting them. So that's still the fact, and that's still what we're doing. And I think that's the positive aspect that I would like to take away from this, is that we can build trust over time. And so this is something where once we do so, we're in it for the long haul here. Huu-ay-aht ain't going anywhere and Bamfield ain't going anywhere. So we have 50, 100, 150 years to really navigate this, climate change notwithstanding. But with that in mind, though, this is okay, guys. Like, I wanted to see this process go forward so that we could, in fact, learn what we need to do and how we need to communicate. One thing that I will own up to is that because I'm the board chair, I didn't want to step in and really advocate on behalf of this project. And I realize now that perhaps I should have more so. And the reason why is because we're always in a tenuous balance of power and influence and fear in regards to what Huu-ay-aht is going to do and what Bamfield is going to do. And as a result, that's something that we need to navigate with some fine touch, with some gentleness and some grace, because this actually feeds into a conversation about the dock. We could have taken over the dock as Huu-ay-aht, but what signals would that have sent to Bamfield? That Huu-ay-aht's taking it over, and suddenly we have all the rights on whether or not West Bamfield could even receive cargo or use it without paying more money, right? Because it would be a private transfer. We didn't want to send that message. So when it comes to that, we're all in it together. It's only one economy down there. So we need to approach that with great care, but also understanding that we all have goals, and sometimes we'll have to work through those goals in a way that makes sense for everyone. So I think that's all right. And I think we're in a good shape. But I think what we're going to need to do early on in any such kind of proceeding about decision making in this way is for people to have an understanding that this isn't something that is always going to be what the secret masters want you to do, but rather this is an opportunity to make a decision and have a dialogue. And we're not doing it in such a way to make people do it. And the only way to prove that is to show that. So that's what we're doing. So thank you. With that in mind, I don't believe I've called for votes, so all in favor of receiving the results, or whatever we want to call it. All opposed? And motion carried. Thank you. Since it's pretty much the same, could you just go to the actual numbers, Cynthia, for the West Bamfield results, and then we'll just go to Director Beckett.
Yes, of course. So for West Bamfield, bylaw number E1066 and F1164. 7 voted yes and 83 voted no. So a total of 92.22% voted against and will not be going for adoption.
Right, thank you for that, Cynthia. Director Beckett, would you like to move the motion?
I would, and just one more little comment, if you don't mind, Chair. West Banfield was not going to an assent vote initially when we had talked about this as staff and moving forward, and in fact, we pivoted, and because there was some input from the west side, it became included in the referendum. And again, I think that's one of the positive lessons where communities spoke and we responded positively in including them in this discussion. So with that, I would like to move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors receive the declaration of official assent vote results and determination of official assent vote results for the West Banfield Sewer Collection System Service.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Steer. Everyone, it seems. Any further comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Thank you. All right. So that brings us into item C. It looks like it is a financial plan amendment for fire protection. Shane, thank you and welcome. Please go ahead.
So, good afternoon. So before you is a fourth budget amendment by law, inclusive of a potential contract award. So staff issued a RFP for a type 1 tactical tender for the Beaver Creek Fire Department. This type of tender has been specifically chosen as it can provide structural fire protection as well as wildland fire suppression. Delivery is expected in 18 to 24 months. We received 2 submissions with Fort Garry Fire Trucks Limited providing both the lowest cost and the highest scoring submission. So staff are proposing a capital budget amendment of $60,000, which would allow for this requested contract award. It's important to note that this additional expenditure will require an additional $60,000 of MFA equipment financing in 2025. Staff would also like to note that fire trucks are now eligible under the new Community Works Funding Agreement, and allocation of these funds will be discussed during the 2025 to 2029 financial planning process, and staff will be including this item for discussion as well. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Shane. Any comments or questions or motions? Director Sparrow, go ahead, and then we'll go to Director Roth.
Director Roth, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? I got lots.
Oh, well, you go ahead. I was just gonna make the motions. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I have a bunch of questions. First of all, we have an AMA agreement, with all the Valley Fire Departments. Is it true that Beaver Creek Fire Department responds to all structure fires within the valley now, or are they still going only to the larger structure fires?
And I'll answer that question for you. Thank you, the chair. Yeah, Beaver Creek does respond to all structure fires in the valley as part of the AMA agreement. All the departments do.
So our AMA agreement now is an automatic agreement per se. We go to all structure fires in the valley as opposed to just going to larger structure fires.
That is correct. The volunteer departments have always been all structure fires, and this past year, Port Alberni opted into all structure fires.
Okay. Has anyone looked into the requirements for a fully automatic aid agreement with an eye towards the amount of apparatus needed in the valley in regards to the amount of frontline trucks needed throughout the valley?
Yes, chiefs have discussed that fully and are open to changes, and actually have just made an ask for one change for Beaver Creek to not respond with a frontline engine, but to respond with their rescue trucks so they're on standby for rescue. So it's something that we review after incidents and we'll continue to do so.
Have you looked at a fire underwriter survey to see what structure apparatus are needed? It was an eye towards removing apparatus.
Yes, we have, and the underwriters have given the volunteer departments on the outskirts of the city great ratings based on the city responding to their calls. And the city gets underwriter ratings based on the number of firefighters the volunteers provide.
True. And the apparatus, is it the right amount? Is it the minimum amount?
The apparatus actually exceeds the amount for the normal structure fire. And for the larger structures, complex structure fires within the city, we do meet the requirements.
Okay, so whether we meet or exceed the minimum requirement. Okay. And your new truck is 1750 tank, so that means dual axles?
No,
Or
it's a single axle truck and the committee has gone through and approved the rating for the axles, so technically it's what fits.
Alrighty, those are the easy questions. Now we're gonna go down and do it.
All right, thank you,
So-
Dr. Sparrow.
No,
Oh,
no,
you have more? Oh,
that
go
was a
ahead, go
warm-up.
ahead, go ahead.
That was just a
Okay.
warm up.
All right.
You're my wheelhouse. The fire underwriter states that what age the trucks must be to receive fire underwriter's criteria for insurance. It's called the service schedule for fire apparatus for fire insurance for grading purposes. It states that a truck must be 15 years old or newer to be a frontline duty truck. They can be placed in a second line duty truck until 20 years of age and then placed on reserve status until it reaches the end of its lifespan. The lifespan of a fire truck depends on the size of the city that it serves. Vancouver's lifespan is 20 years and Beaver Creek can be up to 30 years if annual testing is done for 20 years. Beaver Creek has a 2020 truck right now as a frontline truck until 2035, unless a newer truck replaces it. If Beaver Creek receives a new truck in 2026, it will be the frontline truck until 2041, a 15-year lifespan. At which time the 2020 truck would need to be replaced, as there's no frontline pumper truck under 15 years of age. If this happens, then a 21-year-old truck, 2020, would be gone long before its lifespan. So a 20-year-old truck would be available for some of the departments. I see the best option for Beaver Creek is to find ways to extend the gap between the fire trucks to optimize the level of service of their half-life. This can be done by finding a fire truck that has been taken out of service from a large city and using it for the next few years to increase the difference between the age of the trucks they have now. The same companies that make new fire trucks are also in contact with larger cities, so they know what trucks are coming due. Yes, the truck will not be new and be at the end of its life for a big city, but we only need a few years to fix this issue Beaver Creek has once and for all. If not, then in 2041, we're moving a fire truck before its time has come and costing the taxpayers more money. This is not the first time in the valley we have seen used fire trucks. In Cherry Creek, there was an old fire truck under the lean-to outside the fire hall, 1962 in La France. This is the first new fire truck bought in the valley. Before that, all fire trucks were used fire trucks. Cherry Creek's second truck was a used fire truck. Maple Pro Lake is another example of it buying used. The fire truck at the museum, the city of Port Alberni, it was used fire truck. All of the other fire departments in the valley at one time had a second truck, a second hand to ease the taxpayer burden. This can be done for Beaver Creek. It has been stated at this board that the large expense for fire departments and for buying used is to keep the cost down. Spreading the time between the two purchases and at the same time helping accumulate money so they can purchase a fire truck without going into debt. The board is being asked to make a motion to make residents of Beaver Creek to pay for a new truck when they just bought a fire truck 4 years ago. This problem, having two trucks so close together, should have been resolved years ago, but it was not. And now we're faced with the same issues that the board was then. And I refuse to put Beaver Creek residents in a place of borrowing money when it is not needed. We need to address this problem now and fix it for future generations.
Okay.
And I have a motion unless Susan wants to say something first.
We'll go to Susan first. So go ahead.
Well, I would just like to know what, that's a lot of information for me to take in right now, so I'm unsure about where everything should be right now. So can, Director Sparrow, could you please make a recommendation, or can you go through this?
You want me to go through it? I have a motion I could make. It might make it easier for you. You want to hear the motion? Motion would be, I'd like to make a motion that the board direct staff to find cost-effective ways to spread the time between the fire trucks for the Beaver Creek Fire Department to maximize the lifespan as set out in the fire underwriter's service schedule for fire apparatus for fire insurance grading purposes.
Is, maybe this is a question for Charlie. Is that a clear enough motion for you to pursue that particular course of action.
To respond through the chair, the department is well aware of the FUS requirements. This new truck is not a replacement for the frontline engine. It is a water tender with pumping capacity to be a second line truck. It is not intended to replace the truck that was purchased in 2021, which will be at least 25 years before it's required to be replaced. This truck is a multi-purpose truck that has been well planned out based on the events that have taken place over the past years for the fire department, and is meant to be mainly as a water tender backup, which we are short of in the valley, and go from there. So a little bit off on the FUS requirements.
You have a follow-up at all?
So this won't be a frontline truck, this is gonna be a water tender truck, is what you're trying to tell us, and
This is a type 1 water tender, tactical water tender, which will be able to respond as a backup apparatus. Well aware that we have plenty of frontline engines in the valley. And we do have a rather nice one that was purchased in 2021, which will survive for another 25 years. And knowing that a replacement for that truck, even at this time, would have cost $1.2 million. So we opted to go with this route as a more viable option.
so my question is then, you're asking the people of Beaver Creek to go in debt for a truck that's not required under the fire service underwriter survey to help out with wildland fires. It's not gonna help our insurance ratings, it's just gonna put us in debt. Is that not true?
Not true. We have a second line truck currently that is 25 years old and is an issue and will go into reserve status. And the 30-year-old truck will be sold. And this truck serves multi-purpose and fills in some holes that we've found over the past years with the incidents we responded to.
So everything I said is true then. In 2041, you'll be getting rid of the 2020 truck and to buy another one and put the people of Beaver Creek in a worse financial position.
I'm not sure that it is true, but I won't argue.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Before we go to Susan, Daniel, did you have any supplemental?
Oh, well, Charlie, I do believe that we also verified there are certain online sites and agencies that we can go through in order to track down used apparatus, and I believe we followed that process as well.
Yes, we've looked at online used apparatus and we've been in touch with Rocky Mountain Phoenix, who is an online a used truck specialist. The best they can come up for recent trucks would be 20 years old. Most departments are keeping, so at best it buys you 5 years of extra time. We're looking at that for Banfield coming in the future when they have to replace their truck. And we do what we can, but the chiefs and the technical crew behind this are well versed in what their requirements are.
Thank you. We'll go to a new speaker and then we'll go to Director Sparrow after Director Roth. So, well, Director Roth, Director Haggard, Director Sparrow.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you're saying water tanker truck, does that mean, like, we have fire hydrants all throughout Beaver Creek, so is this something that would be used without a fire hydrant? Like, why do we need it, is what I'm trying to say, or is it something that's primarily for the valley?
Well, while we do have fire hydrants in Beaver Creek, we do have many areas that are not hydrant protected.
In Beaver Creek?
In Beaver Creek, the outlying areas are unprotected, and this fills in that hole and buys us time, yes, for water supply until hydrants are connected and that sort of thing.
So where, just because I thought we had a hydrant everywhere, so whereabouts do we not?
The Mountain Ranch Road area, Granville Road area, the lower end of Ferguson Road. There's many areas throughout the district that are not within hydrant. And to be protected by hydrant, you have to be within 1,000 feet of a hydrant, and there's lots of areas that are not that close.
So how did we do it up until this point?
With tenders and with the acceptable water that we've had, and it's now time to replace the 1,000 gallon pumper tender that we used with this 1750, more versatile apparatus.
Okay. Is there a way that we can do some more thinking and have some more thought on this and bring it up in the next agenda?
Yeah, so that sounds like where we're going, and because I
Okay.
think everyone would benefit from having more than 4 pages of information on this. I think that it will assuage the concerns that people have who have expertise that I do not. I wouldn't mind seeing Gantt charts of how that forward planning works, but don't do that. That's just remedial for me. So I think we'll come back to you, Director Roth, and then maybe we can do a motion to ask for more information at the next meeting or the next meeting. But I do have Director Haggard up next. Please go ahead.
Charlie answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, and then Director Boyko, and then Director Sparrow.
Before we defer, Charlie, can you confirm the length of time we have to respond to the quotes that were received? Or maybe Shane can?
He's looking it up. So we'll go to Director Boyko and then Director Sparrow.
Thank you, Chair. The decisions we make here last for decades. And buying a 20-year or 30-year or extending the maintenance and all these things, these are all very good points brought up by Director Sparrow. I think it would be prudent to have some kind of Gantt chart should be able to be made in 5 minutes about expected lives of all the units in Beaver Creek, Sproat Lake, Bamfield, etc., so that we can all make informed decisions to make sure we're all pursuing the right path and spending taxpayer money effectively and efficiently at the lowest cost acceptable bid. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boyko. Shane, just interrupt when you're ready.
Awesome, thank you. Through the chair, we have until January 15th, 2025 to respond. Something to note is there are new emission standards coming in, which is why staff had prepared this at this point. I'm not exactly sure on the date of those new emission standards. Maybe Charlie can speak to that, but it's anticipated that those additional engine requirements will cost $60,000 to $80,000 more than the submitted price.
Yeah, the EPA is bringing in new standards in January 1st, 2027, and we're expecting to see the results of those coming up as early as next year, when they're going to cut out the engines that we're currently using and they will no longer be available. And the pricing that we've been given has been anywhere between $50,000 and $150,000 extra charge rate on top.
Sorry, Director Sparrow, go ahead.
Thank you. The whole idea is Beaver Creek's always had 2 fire trucks that were really close together, and this puts a huge financial burden on the taxpayers of Beaver Creek. And they should have years ago replaced one earlier, because it was less than 15 years of first line truck. So the idea is to spread these apart. And Charlie did make mention that you can buy used. It's not great. You're right. We've all been through it. Every fire department in this valley has been through that painful aspect of trying to pull their fire trucks apart to the right length of time in order to alleviate the pressures of the financial burden. Because yes, $1 million fire trucks are here, and it's not come to the valley even for the small departments. So the longer we can pull these apart and ease the burden over the years, because each year is $30,000 on a fire truck. Each truck is what it costs. That's a lot of money. So let's pull them apart, get 12 and a half, 15 years between them. Because that's the minimum we can have. And if the AMA agreement can be set out so we can have one less truck in the valley, that's $1 million saved. So let's look at it that way. Thank you.
And if I might respond one more time through the chair to Director Sparrow, agreed. And that is why this unit will not be a rated unit as a tender and will not be require replacement in its 25-year term.
Whoa. Whoa.
Go ahead.
This is not a UL plated truck.
It'll be UL plated, but it not being a frontline apparatus, it's operating as a tender. It buys us time to spread them out. So the next first line apparatus will be the replacement for the previous truck. This one will stay longer.
That's not even better.
Yeah.
Worse.
I think what we'll need to do is have a report that spells this out for someone like me, so that it helps inform everyone involved. With that in mind, before we go to Susan, because I think you just want to, I think the term is defer, but I don't know if that's the case. Maybe what the procedural thing says. But I do want to say that I appreciate the line of questioning that folks have been having lately, because a lot of what it does is it edifies the people who don't know about how all this works. But also it sounds like sometimes when we ask questions, even if we think we know the answers, part of this is to help everyone here understand where we're at, but also for people online and in the gallery to understand that we're asking the right questions, but also helping to paint a picture. So I would definitely like to see what the approach to having that kind of really close together hit in the calendar would look like. And it sounds like, Charlie, you have an approach that can be explained, and whether or not that's acceptable, I think will be based on the conversations that we have at this table. And that will include people who have an opinion on how this works, even at the board. So I think we just need to make sure that the information as it's presented is understandable, but also addresses the concerns that were discussed here. So thank you for that. Also, I forgot my next point, so we'll just go to Director Roth. So please go ahead, Susan.
I would like to make a motion to defer the request for decision so that we can get more information and answers to the responses or to the questions that were asked today, please.
Thank you. I'd like to put some time parameters around that. Is next
Sure.
for the meeting after that, okay? If it's the meeting after, that might make it really, really tight. So maybe the next meeting, is that enough time to do it?
It's going to have to be the December meeting. So yes, there's only one. Yeah.
It'll have to be the December meeting then. Is that okay, Director Roth?
Yeah, and I'm okay if it takes longer because I don't like it whenever I'm put in a corner and it's a pretty important decision and it involves a lot of money. Thanks.
Thank you for that. So that's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Coots. Any further comments? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Thank you. Okay. Oh, and you are unmuted, Director Roth, if that matters.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next item is item D. It is the bylaw expansion for Beaver Creek Fire Department Service. Is this related to the previous one or a different item? It's a different item. Please go ahead then.
Thank you. So Terry wrote the report, but she couldn't be here today, so I'll try and provide a short summary for you. So today I'm asking the board to give 3 readings to bylaw E 1052. It's really just to simplify the governance boundary of the Beaver Creek Volunteer Fire Department service area to include the adjacent service areas of the Granville Road Fire Protection Area and the Mountain Ranch Road Fire Protection Area. The purpose is just to eliminate the redundant services. So this is a truly administrative amendment. There's no overall change to the area service by the fire department. We're just consolidating the same services together. Staff sent a letter to all residents within the Granville Road and Mountain Ranch Road areas to advise of this potential change. One property reached out with questions, but no concerns were raised. There'll be a change on how fire protection line is shown on property tax notices. It'll just change from Granville Road and Mountain Ranch Road to Beaver Creek Fire Protection. Should the board give 3 readings to this bylaw, staff will send the bylaw to the the inspector of municipalities for approval, and then the bylaw will be brought back to the board for adoption at a future meeting. Again, there's no financial impact. It's just a truly administrative procedure. And then once the bylaw is adopted, we will bring back the Mountain Ranch Road and Granville Road bylaws to be repealed.
Thank you. Director Roth, did you want to take this? Please go ahead.
Thank you. I will move through the motions. Do I make all together or do I do one at a time?
Yeah, let's do them separate. Read out the first one, and then you can just say second and third reading afterwards.
Okay. I move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give first reading to bylaw cited as bylaw E 1052-7, Beaver Creek Fire Protection Service Area Amendment 2024.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you, Director Coots. Any further comment? Director Lacossiere, please go ahead.
I had, when I was looking at the map, excuse me, Schedule A, the present area with the darker lines, and then the new areas being brought in checkerboard. there's a little V in there that doesn't seem to have any coverage. Is that odd, or is that no coverage, or what's happening to that area?
Is that something that we could ask?
I would ask Charlie if
Charlie?
he's still online.
Yeah. Charlie, would you happen to know, looking at that map?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, there is in fact no coverage in that little V area. Those residents did not opt into the joining when they were asked. Not unusual.
Sorry, I remember that being talked about, so I can corroborate that. Do you have a follow-up?
So these people have no fire coverage?
That's correct.
That's quite interesting. Okay, well, that answered my question.
Eyebrow raised noted.
Thank you.
Director Sparrow and then Director Blanco.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, these are Beaufort EA director areas that are, okay, they're receiving, just making sure that who's receiving what service areas. Yeah, and then people that don't have fire protection, if they have a fire, well, they're on their own. They get what they pay for.
Director Blanco, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. That is correct. These are in the Beaufort electoral area. A majority of Beaufort does not have fire services and does not want them for various reasons, along with everything else. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just the residential areas that have it, right, on the main road? Yeah. Okay, any further comments? Okay, so that was first reading. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Please continue, Director Roth.
Okay. Second, I'll just read it. That the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors gives second reading to the bylaw cited as bylaw E1052-7 Beaver Creek Fire Protection Service Area Amendment 2024. Sorry.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any further comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to note that fire protection is not people don't, or areas do not have to have fire protection. It's a choice, just in case people don't understand that. Okay, and I'll move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors give third reading.
Oh, we haven't finished second reading yet.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. Please continue.
Okay, and third reading.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Boyko. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? And motion carried. Thank you. Alrighty, so that brings us to item E. It's grant and aid policy. Please go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. So I'm pleased today to be presenting the board the final grant and aid policy for adoption. As a reminder, we discussed the grant and aid program at CAL meetings in June and August this year. At that time, the committee provided staff direction to develop a grant and aid policy based on the following changes, including a removal of reference to double dipping. The definitions in the policy were clarified. We added the opportunity for a small grant, less than $500. And we were instructed to clarify the financial independence policy statement. We also selected to move forward with 9 separate grant and aid categories as outlined in your report. As a reminder, each of these categories will set their own budget as part of the overall budget process and will be in place by the end of March. Budgets could vary from year to year. Finance staff will help in the 2025 budget process by bringing forward some historical budget information on past grant and aids. Grant and aid applications will be due at the end of April, and then they will be reviewed in May. West Coast applications will be reviewed at the West Coast Committee. AB&B grant applications will go to the AB&B Committee for review. And then regional grant and aid applications will be made at a CAL meeting. All of these recommendations will come to the board for decision. EA grant applications will be reviewed by individual EA directors, and then recommendations brought to the board as well. Since we met in August, myself and Terry met with Director Beckett, who's selected to participate in the Alberni Valley and Bamfield grant and aid category, in addition to participating in the regional grant and aid and the Bamfield specific grant and aid. We've also reached out to the 4 treaty nations to determine if they want to participate in the ACRD grant and aid program. We met with Chilpot, and at this time they've decided not to participate. We're meeting with Uchuckalset government next week to discuss this. So based on these discussions, it may take additional time for each of the 4 treaty nations to determine if they want to participate. So I'm recommending that the board proceed with adopting the grant and aid policy today, should you be happy with it. And then once that's complete, we'll work on developing application forms and information to share the new program with the public so that they understand the new program and help them apply and understand the new deadlines. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Director Boyko, go ahead.
Thank you. I got 2 questions. Who decides in the application what bucket the grant need is assigned to? Is that the applicant, staff, or board?
So the applicant, I anticipate though the first year the applicants may have questions. So we'll work through helping them to decide.
So, but then we'll come to the board and the board can amend those things as it sees fit, correct?
So give me an example.
I'll give you a very relevant example that we're talking about in the future here. Air Quality Council, the Beaufort people survived on having wood stoves out there and they don't want to pay for that moving forward. How will they get their say on not putting money towards that in the future if they select, I want to get paid by everybody? How will that process take place?
So
in the past, they check off, I want to get paid by everybody. How do the board decide they want to allocate funds to different areas?
I would envision that type of applicant would go to the Alberni Valley and Bamfield category and not to EA directors' individual categories.
So you're saying there's no ability for the members of this board to decide who pays for what grant? It's only the applicant, is that correct?
So the members of each category decide the funding that they want to go into their budget, and then they decide which grant applications to approve.
Okay, so just to interrupt you there, I think we're having a misunderstanding around this. People can apply to whatever they like, but who decides whether or not it goes through is still the people who would ultimately pay. But what I think Director Boyko is asking for is how do we show that and how do we actually do that? What's the process involved? Okay, so it sounds like the filter is the committee level. Is that true? Yeah, so the committee would be true, but does Beaufort have to wait for a committee of the whole to decide to refer this to the AVB? And then the AVB makes a conversation about, no, we don't want to do it, or we do, and then so on and so forth. I think it's more about how much time between making the obvious decision and not. It sounds like that's what it is, right? Because the way I would envision it, if somebody's checked off everyone in the AVB, that would just go to AVB. But if they check off everyone for some reason, it sounds like it would have to go to the committee of the whole first and then referred from there to AVB, which sounds like a waste of time. So I think it's about addressing the waste of time. Just for clarification, is that the case?
It's not just clarifying that, but we're taking away the ability for people, if someone says AVB pay for it, everyone gets the rubber stamp paid for it at that point. The ability for individual areas to opt in or out dies at that point. Correct?
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm seeing a head nod here. So at this point, Beaufort will not be supporting that policy for that reason. Second, I have a second question though. Financial independence. How is that actually, I don't see very much written about that here, but in the previous policy, we were working towards grant needs for organizations to have some kind of time limit that was never defined to have people work towards financial independence. Are we going to put a time limit on that, or are we going to continue doing grant needs for organizations at infinity basis, even though we say we want people to be financially independent? So as a board, we need to figure out what we're going to do, because we say we don't want to give money to groups forever, but now we're saying that we will do that and it's not defined. I think we should define that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there a response to that, at least interpretation wise? Go ahead.
Well, it's in there, but it's an extremely hard area to pinpoint because different groups have different abilities to gain, quote, financial independence. And what we've seen in the past grants is that on case by case, it is a different standard. There are simply some agencies that have no means of achieving financial independence. Whether you're looking at the backpack program for schools, they have no no ability of getting subscriptions because the people they're servicing don't have the means to pay for the food in the backpack. So they'll forever be asking different agencies, and that puts us in a position of saying, we would like it if you found the path. But if we made that a hard standard, then some of these agencies would never be able to get funding from us after, say, a 3-year term. So it was a really hard one for us to put a hard line in, knowing that some of these agencies don't have that ability. Other agencies clearly do. They've got, if we talk about the chamber or different things, they could be part of a service if we wanted to do a service. They could increase member fees if they wanted to increase member fees. So they have different structures, but all of them can fall under the umbrella of being either not-for-profit and therefore could apply. So we're trying to evaluate different agencies in a consistent way. And so to do that, we have to loosen some of the definitions, and that's one of the looser definitions.
Okay, thank you. I do see Director Steer. You are up next. Go ahead. You are muted though.
I do click it. I just for Director Boyko, at the end of the day, the board always has the discretion to deny or accept an application. So that is always within our wheelhouse to be able to do that. So that always gives us that ability, regardless of if they have the financial independence or not. We can request that, and at the end of the day, that would be part of the conversation or a question that the director may ask. And then at that point, they can make their decisions whether it would be appropriate or not to continue to finance them. I did have, is it my turn to ask a question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Through the chair. I just had in terms of, thank you for going through, when I look at the grants and aid policy, when I first came onto the board, I was shocked at the amount and the numbers and the complexity of all the electoral area, the municipalities, et cetera, et cetera. So I really commend staff on taking this on because it was requested to do. It's a very complex one as compared to a simple municipality. I did have a question regarding budgets in around where, and if I'm reading the report right, budgets for each of the above categories are set each year. So those categories, and I've got West, the one that I would be involved with, West Coast Grant and Aid category. When does that discussion take place, and in what format? Is that at a West Coast committee meeting where we would set the, I suspect, a maximum amount from a budget perspective? And I had a second one, but let's just start with that one.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. The budget discussion would happen at the West Coast Committee.
Right, and we would have the conversation that time in terms of where we're looking at setting maximums. And I get, and through that discussion, I noticed in the report, and one of the things that we do have at the district is a maximum of amount that an individual applicant can apply for. And one of the other conversations that's come up, and I may have missed it in the policy, is what we often see is that an organization will apply for a grant. And then they'll, as a very specific category, and then, as another project apply. And we have some discretion with that. Did I read anywhere in there where they can only apply for one grant, or am I making that up in my head?
There's definitely no maximum identified in the policy about what they can apply for. And I don't believe that we have put in there one project only.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, I have Director Siga and then Director Broth.
Yeah, I was concerned about 0.9 under policy where funding cannot be applied for until they have showed that they have used the funds according to how they did in the previous year. And I was just so maybe it takes them 2 years to provide that documentation, and then they can apply right away because it's 2 years since. So I'm just wondering if it shouldn't be cannot apply again until documentation is provided, and failure to do so will result in inability to apply for 3 years. I can see a loophole kind of forming in my head here.
The grant and aid funding is intended to be used in 1 year's time, so it shouldn't be taking 2 years' time for the final report to be received. Should there be a reason why that is the case, they could apply for an extension on that. I think we can be receptive to that.
But would they still be eligible to apply for another grant if they're given an extension on the first one? I'm just thinking for to be fiscally accountable, that should just sort of be mandatory and a bit more of a penalty if they don't.
Dr. Siga, my interpretation of it, and I only read it twice, is that I think that could be a separate decision of the board, so that, you know, extenuating circumstances could be identified if that exists. But just having a hard policy might create difficulties in certain instances. I don't know. I think that's something that we might want to consider as an amendment in the future.
Yeah, I'm fine with seeing how the policy plays out. It'll be interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. I have Dr. Roth and then Dr. Haggard after Daniel. You wanted to add something?
I think Director Sega said exactly what I was going to say. As a policy, as we're working through it for the first time, on the fly, the board can say that they, you know, will amend the policy or say no to something. So it does require a vote, but as you're working through a policy, your ability to alter that policy, if it's not working in the moment, is yours at this table, and we'll come back with an amendment to follow up. So they are, you know, even though we follow them as strictly as possible, the reality is that they are your tools that you create for other people, including staff, to follow. And if they're not working for you, you can amend them.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Roth, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just wondering, I'm studying a grant writing course right now, a university level course, and they do peer reviews often in government agencies. And I'm wondering if we could add a peer review process before they go to the committee of the whole to weed out applications that don't meet the policies. Like, it sounds like it works really well. And in particular in the United States, they do this, but it's very helpful to have peer reviews.
It's not a bad recommendation. It's just the challenge with the peer review on applications, if I'm understanding correctly, on applications that would come in, is just the time costs associated for staff. And if we're asking peers either from other local governments to take a look or to form a panel, the question would be, are we also reviewing theirs in kind, or are we covering their costs? And my concern would be just that the cost of administering the grants would be too high.
What about a peer review committee?
Always possible. It's just how we want to establish it, right?
So I think that's something that we can consider for amendments. I think part of the difficulty with a committee is that what you would be doing is delegating authority that each director technically has for their community. So if we have a committee that's identified, as long as people understand that there may be applications that just are never considered because the committee's filtering them out. I'm just trying to think of policy.
Advisory committee.
Yeah, or something. But that's what each committee is meant to do. So if you think of it as a series of filters, a bunch of things get filtered into regional committees, right? Or sub-regional committees. Those committees will review those grants and aid applications, and then they will make recommendations. So what they'll give back to the board would be 3 categories. A lump of them that goes, we recommend you just go forward with these ones. We're okay with these. We recommend you don't go with these ones. So we, as a block. And then there may be a 3rd category of, we don't know what to do with this. We want the committee of the whole or the board to decide. And each of those committees would likely do that. And so if you create those blocks, hopefully you're saving time, at least in a long run, kind of over a couple of years, so people understand how the system works. But a lot of the reason we had a grant and aid policy is A, to set limits, and B, to save time. Because I think for most directors, Renee notwithstanding, because I don't know what your opinion is, grants and aid are brutal. So if we can avoid having to go through all of them all as a group, I think everyone would appreciate that, because there are definitely ones for the AV or the West Coast that vice versa don't care about. And sometimes we spend a lot of times in the big meeting dealing with those. So I think the biggest sub-regional conversation is West Coast and not West Coast, and then go from there. So with that in mind, I think the policy is in an okay shape if we start thinking about it in terms of filtering and trying to save time and money. So that first aspect of setting the budget at the top means that the committees have to take a mind on what budget you have at the very beginning and not getting to zero before you get to the bottom of the list, unless you choose to do that, right? So some of that money management stuff will happen in a recommendation at the committee level, but that's designed so that we can get through a block of 12 of them in one motion, because they're all recommended by the various committees by the time we get to that board meeting, right? So I think there's more variability and more options for committees to make those recommendations, as long as we think of them in terms of blocks. Yes, no, maybe. And then if any individual directors at the board level don't agree with something being yes or no block, they can pull them out with a motion, or just automatically pull them out. I don't know, but we can look at those kind of conventions moving forward as well, so that something isn't missed. So there's a lot of variability there. This just reminds me a lot of NTC kind of conversations that we had in the past. So this is something I feel I'm a little more aware of. Hopefully that addresses some of your concerns, Director Roth. Did you have a follow-up at all? Yeah, all good. Thank you for being patient, Director Haggard. You're up next, and then Director Steer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank Heather for taking on an impossible task. You've done a fantastic job. Thank you so much. Question, and then I need a clarification on something in the policy. We had talked about long-term agreements for such organizations like the backpack program. Is that going to be coming up when we actually do the grants and aid? Or I can't remember what decision we made about those long-term agreements.
No, the committee didn't support moving ahead with long-term agreements. That wasn't included in the policy.
Okay, thank you. And a clarification about the timeline. It says grants and aid must be used within 12 months of being approved. Then grant deliberation will occur in late May or early June, and funding will be issued in August. And then it says final report no later than March 31st the following year. That's not 12 months though.
No, it's not. So the decisions are made in May or June. The funding is released on August 1st. Should somebody request the money earlier, we do provide that funding earlier. So really the funding is approved in June. Yeah.
Even if it's approved in June, it says the final report no later than March 31st. That's still not 12 months as it says earlier.
Correct. The reason was to ensure that they have their final reporting in before they apply the second time.
So should we change that 12 months then? Shorten that.
We
12
could,
months
or we
period?
could change the reporting deadline, but yeah.
That's the only thing I need to clarify. Everything else was fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, so this just occurred to me, rather than applying to each of the different districts or different electoral areas, rather they would apply to certain committees and then they're automatically filtering themselves too. I don't know if that's something that can be done in the actual application forms, or if that needs to be in the policy.
Yeah, that is the intent, is that the 9 categories are outlaid in the policy. And then so the grant application form will have all of those 9 categories outlined. So if somebody's applying for a community project in Beaver Creek and it's only in Beaver Creek, they would be applying to the Beaver Creek electoral area grant and aid. So Director Ross would be the person looking at that, making the recommendation. But if it's a Alberni Valley wide project, they'd be applying to the AV&B grant category.
Okay. that might help as well. So that's where that comes from. Okay, are there, Director Steer, please go ahead.
Through the chair, thank you. I was gonna add, but I think you allocate, well, somewhat more than I was going to do in terms of the process for selection, in terms of Director Ross' suggestion around a committee, which we did in Tofino, but we have like a tenth of the number of grants because it was a very difficult process. So we struck a committee. And basically, the bulk of their work was to weed out those that just did not meet the criteria. So that just got rid of, a dozen or so right off the top of the bat, and then made those recommendations. Way more complex with the categories here. And I think Chair Jack explained how I think the process maybe a little more streamlined through the categories and our ability initially to weed those out. But I do appreciate the suggestion because we went through that process after 7 years of trying to figure it out. So we just struck a committee and gave it to them. So thank you, and I'll leave it there.
I think if my interpretation really that the policy worked is that if an application doesn't meet the criteria or is incomplete, I think staff can just filter those off the top, like before we even see them, and maybe give them a chance to correct it if need be, if it's just like obviously a mistake. I have Director Coots up next. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair, I believe I just have a very plain Jane kind of technical question, and I believe this is going to be going to admin, perhaps Daniel, maybe even perhaps Cynthia. I have a question in regard to the vote of the motion itself. Given the circumstances that the brunt of the treaty nations have not come to the decision of how we are going forward, is it the preference of the board that we would be abstaining from this decision? And my apologies are because I cannot recall if this board allows for abstentions or not. Clicko.
Thanks. I think abstentions are yes votes, or they go with the motion, whatever it's put forward. So if you don't vote, it's a silence is acquiescence kind of thing. That being said, I wouldn't say that the nations can't, because grants and aid are actually part of general administration, which means everyone has a say. Whether or not we have a say in whether or not money gets spent, which I think is the actual point, that's where we decide whether or not we're in or out. Part of the conversation with Huu-ay-aht is, are we sticking with things that are only Anakla-Bamfield relevant? Or do we also want to be part of ABB in some way? Because 60% of our people live, or 40% of our people live in the valley, and so on and so forth. But from a policy perspective, if you have something to add from the creation of the policy, that's different than whether or not you should have a say in whether or not Beaufort should put money in, right? That's a separate vote. Director Boyko?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something you just said there, is that if a Treaty First Nation does not have a financial impact on it, they do not get to vote on it. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, grants and aid are money things. So if we don't participate, then we don't really vote, which is why I don't vote.
Does that apply to more than just grant needs or just grant needs? That statement that was just made.
So there are certain things that First Nations must be a part of in terms of the services that are there, and then there are things that they can choose to be a part of. So the only compulsory things that First Nations must be a part of are general administration, hospital district, and emergency planning. I think those are the only three. General administration has to do with development of policy, as well as hiring or creating a position or not, and having those kind of say. And then emergency planning is fairly straightforward, and the regional hospital district is straightforward. Everything else is we opt in the same way that everybody else would. So for the most part, Huu-ay-aht seems to have a preference for service agreements rather than being a part of the service, despite the conversations that I have with my council. But that's just how the chips fall for us. It's different for Hotchukwasit because they're, say, involved in various services that they've been a part of. So it's pretty much the same approach. But in the treaty, it's stated that if you join a regional district, you must be a part of these three at least, which is the basis of the vote, I think, is the conversation in that one. Go ahead.
So just to follow up, when you say a First Nation, Treaty First Nation can opt in, is that just I opt in, or is that put money in on the table for that service?
It would be putting money in. So the criteria for opting in is the same for everybody else. So you don't get a say on how a policy or how a service goes unless you buy into it, right? That's the basis of it. So that doesn't fundamentally change for First Nations. And so having those conversations is still a regular part. Usually, say if Huu-ay-aht wanted to horn in on electoral area planning because we wanted to say in Bamfield, we would have to ask the board And that would be subject to conversations about whether or not that's appropriate, right? So there's still a way to do it. We can still want to, but that's more controversial than, say, if we wanted to be a part of some service that's mostly just us paying into it to help make a decision on how that gets managed in the future. Like, I can't think of anything for Banfield. But like wanting to have a say in, oh, that's too controversial. I'll say it anyway, the pool, right? So we can opt into that and pay our share of that to have a say in how it gets managed once it gets built, if it gets built, right? But that's a separate thing entirely.
Yeah, that's a separate thing. I know we have the ability to use number of units now as a good method. Now that we're doing GIS tracking for enhanced 911, we do have enhanced our ability to figure out a taxation strategy, because using appraised value is not really appropriate.
Yeah.
It's another topic, but I know we're going off topic here, but I'd like to request for this vote that we're going to be doing here in a second to be a recorded vote, and then we can move on. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it can be a strategic planning discussion, I think would be one that we talk about. Are there any other comments? Seeing none. Do we have a motion to put this forward? Do you want to take it? Go ahead.
All right. Make this motion, Mr. Mayor. That the Bernie Valley, Bernie Clay Regional District Board Directors rescind the grant and aid policy dated December 7th, 2012, and adopt the grant, attached grant and aid policy as presented. Would that be right, as presented?
Yep, thank you. Seconded by? Thank you, Director Siga. Any further comments? Okay, so when I say all in favor, please keep your hands raised. Okay, all in favor? Oh, okay, I'll start online. Kirsten Johnson, Veda Siga, Marilyn McEwen, Tom Steer, Bob Beckett, and Lavana Mastrangelo. And then in the building, we have Dr. Coots. I said people's names in this one, sorry. Dr. Sparrow, Dr. Lacossiere, Dr. Haggard, and myself. And all opposed? Thank you. And that's Dr. Boyko and Dr. Roth. Okay, thank you. Okay, so with that in mind, we can move on. Item F is a request for decision regarding financial plan meeting schedule, or sorry, board committee and financial plan meeting schedule. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. So the 2025 meeting schedule is attached to the request for decision, asking the board to confirm it. It includes all board, committee, and financial planning meetings. Generally, board meetings are on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month. However, staff are recommending the January board meetings are held on the third and fifth weeks instead. Additionally, UBCM convention is held the fourth week of September. So in September, we're only proposing one board meeting that month. And then the board generally holds one board meeting per year at an off-site location. So based on a rotational basis. So this year we're recommending either Anakla or Banfield to be the meeting location for the second board meeting in May, subject to finding a suitable location. So we'd like for the board to consider this location, and if it's chosen, then I would ask the board to consider attending in person. We would make travel arrangements for the board and bring IT equipment so that the meeting could be live streamed. But we would want to ensure that we have quorum in the room just in case the IT equipment fails. So yeah, I'd present that for the board's consideration.
Thank you. Does anyone have any comments? Dr. Steer and then Dr. Boyko.
Yes, thank you. And through the chair, I did ask this many years ago, but once again, I would like to bring up the topic of, in terms of our times that we have the meeting at 1:30 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, and for two reasons. One, in terms of, I understood why in the past that was an issue in terms of maybe some of the electoral area directors and those of us on the West Coast to be able to attend meetings, especially in the winter time, to be able to travel during those times. But now with the ability to Zoom, I think there should be a question in terms of allowing the general public, many who work 9 to 5 often or 8 to 4, to be able to participate more fully. They would have to take time off work to be able to attend a board meeting, to be able to participate in these conversations. The other aspect of it is, once again, about those who would like to pursue office. Many of us do have full-time jobs, and so be able to attract more people to this forum, this electoral forum. I think it would be a conversation that the board should have to be able to attract those that maybe have jobs, because I don't know anyone who can afford to be a board member and not have a job. So the realities is that the times should be set for those, for the general public to be able to participate. Maybe not what are the conveniences of the elected officials. That being said, to be able to attract those to come onto this board, I think it'd be important to have that conversation about adjusting the timeframes where we hold our meetings. I'll leave it there, and I don't know if the rest of the board wants to weigh in on that at all, but maybe if staff have some conversations about why we continued mid-afternoon, midweek for our board meetings, I'd like to hear maybe some feedback on that.
Right. Thank you, Director Steer. I have Director Boyko and then Director Roth.
Director Steer, I second your comments wholeheartedly. Look around the boardroom here, and most of the members here are potentially not working full-time anymore. And it does make it difficult, and attracting new people to the board and getting younger voices out here is always appropriate. In the gallery here, we have several members currently. Most of the time, there's nobody watching online and there's nobody in the boardroom. When you go and watch the YouTube feed, a couple days later, there's 50 or 100 or 150 people actually watch the meetings. So people actually care and they want to be involved. Well, like you said, this is very inconvenient to be here. Most of the time, you'll see me online for that reason. So I wholeheartedly would definitely appreciate having these at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and come in for a couple hours and have a good time. And we get a lot more public participation as well. Open, transparent, and be accountable. Make your votes in front of people live as you're doing them. I just support that, but I had another point here. Financial presentation open house. How come we only ever do it at the Cherry Creek Community Hall once a year? Can we move that around? Can we do one at Beaver Creek? We do not do one here. We have a talk and then we do one at Cherry Creek. Can we have more input? Because this is the most important thing, that we actually have discussions with the public. Either have several at different places like Sproat Lake, Beaver Creek Hall, or at least rotate it every year so it's not in the same place, so we actually get more public participation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Daniel?
Jenny wants to start.
Jenny, go ahead.
If I may, we do actually have more of those. We did one at Sprout Lake, I think last year. And so we try, and actually Terry's fantastic about doing that. So I think the answer is a resounding yes. And we, especially with the financial plan, I think that's a great avenue to engage with the public. And I will speak on Terry's behalf because I just know what she'll say. She loves doing the financial plan presentation. So not a problem. If you want, if you're thinking maybe something at the Beaver Creek Community Hall,
I only see Cherry Creek on the schedule. That's why I'm saying that. And I know that's how it was last year as well. If we have it in Sproat Lake, maybe I'm not aware of it, but most of the time it's one per year at Cherry Creek. Having it in other places will be great. We're going to schedule our next town hall right in the middle of that so we can have some very good public engagement discussion and have 150 people weigh in on what they want to pay for and what they don't. Whether we have staff there do it or not is up in the air, but definitely it will be a topic of discussion.
Thank you, Daniel.
Just adding to that, the reason why it's on Cherry Creek is that it's written in the bylaw for Cherry Creek, and that tends to be our general rural catch-all. But going above and beyond what's in there is within our means, and we do it every year. Sproat Lake, every year in February, we do a specific budget, mainly because Director Cody has always asked for that. It's not in the advertised schedule, but it's what we plan for the rural area. And so similar to what Jenny has said, we'll coordinate with any individual director, gladly come to one of your town hall meetings and take part in that. And so we do the same extension to Bamfield, but also Ucluelet and Tofino. We tend to coordinate, and the city of Port Alberni, we try and coordinate with their public outreach on budgets. And so we set up a table so that when people are coming in for their budgets in that municipality, we have an opportunity to explain that line item on their taxation, which is the regional district, and explain what they're a part of or not. And it's usually actually Ucluelet is the one I've regularly attended, and Ucluelet is extremely well attended. Even in terrible weather, we get great turnout. So it's really beneficial.
All right, thank you. Director Roth, we have you up next. Did I miss anyone? Do you want to go again? No? Okay. Go ahead, Director Roth.
Thank you. I'd like to just lend my support also to Director Steer and Boyko. I'm in complete agreement that we should be doing meetings in the evening rather than the afternoon. I just wanted to let everybody know this is my office, and I'm really lucky to have a great employer, and not everyone is so lucky. And it also could attract other people knowing that they can do it this way, but it needs to be, you know, more reasonable hours. And we also need to allow, you know, just like you're talking about the public, they're basically non-existent. So we really need to encourage the public coming to meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roth. Any further comments, Dr. Sparrow?
Thank you. I understand the need to go later in the day. That's what the city used to do years ago, but I think their result was the staff time, because, you know, we have staff time here. So if you look at, there's two sides, look at the financial side, saying we got to cut costs. At the same time, you're looking at extra staff time for being here at nighttime. So you got to weigh them both out. So I don't really know the answer, but there is always two sides to the coin. So I'm sure we're going to go with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boyko.
Thank you. It's meeting once every 2 weeks, sometimes two in a row kind of thing, but I'm sure that every employer can set up some kind of schedule that you take the morning off, come in later in the day, do a split shift or something like that, work with some kind of union agreement to make that happen. But I'm sure that is something that can be overcome quite easily. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think we have union workers involved in the meetings except for facility. Daniel, go ahead.
So the answer to that is yes. I mean, all of the contracts are the time that staff work is something that we can navigate. And even where there are, like, we do have union support in the background for admin and whatnot that occurs, when that occurs, the union contract is equipped for that. So in some cases there is an increased cost. In other cases, in most cases for management, there's flexibility that we can build into the schedule. The thing the board, if the board wants to go down this path, the thing the board needs to remember is that the time that's established is in the bylaw. So we would need to change the bylaw in order to adjust the time.
Dr. Sparrow, go ahead.
I know we're kind of wearing this thing down. One other thing is next month, December, we have an all-day meeting, one at 10 o'clock and one at 1:30. So you have to understand that if we do that in the afternoon, it'll be a very long night for some people. Just say.
Yeah. There are things that we could do to go through the agenda quicker as well. Other jurisdictions have block voting for things like minutes, and then you just give them the opportunity to pull minutes out if need be. You can save some time doing that. Dr. Steer, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, there are a number of ways to work around this. I don't want, I'm not proposed to make an amendment or ask for a bylaw switch right now. It's something that I think for next year, if we're coming up, is a discussion we would have previous to having the schedule coming up, and maybe that could be set on a board agenda previous to that, so that we can have a more fulsome discussion. And then if there is a need to maybe look at the amendment to the bylaw, it would give staff ample time to be able to create that for that. So I'm not suggesting that for the 2025 schedule, and then 2026 will be an election year. But that being said, I think it would be a great time to have that conversation in terms of more realistic. I don't expect it for 2025.
Yeah, we can have the conversation during a kind of strategic planning session too, right? And just really set the agenda for that, because there would be a bylaw update and so on and so forth. But it's not impossible. I have Director Boyko and then Dr. Haggard, and then that's it, guys. This is a long conversation about scheduling. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a motion that we have a future bylaw amendment for this topic of changing the meetings to start at 7 o'clock at night for all of them. And if it's gonna be an all-day meeting, maybe we do one night, one the next night. There are ways to make this happen and increase public involvement and carry on. Whether that happens in a strategic meeting thing, but I'll make a motion right now. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Oh, thank you, Director Roth. Any further comments? So the comment that I have is that Heather Zenner has told me that we already have the mandate to look at our procedures bylaw anyway, so we can just slot that into the work that's already ongoing. So I think we can actually get it done fairly readily, fairly easily. So I think that's something we can add to that. Go ahead.
When are we looking at that?
I don't know when it's coming back.
That'll be early 2025. There's been a number of recommendations from directors over the last few months to make changes to the procedures bylaw, and the time to start the meetings at 1:30 is included in that procedures bylaw. So this would fit nicely in that review.
So I'll amend my motion to say, let's look at that when we look at the procedures bylaw in early 2025.
Do you want to, is that okay, Director Roth? Yeah, okay. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Okay, motion carried. And Director Haggard, you had a comment?
I'd like to make the motion, please, after all this conversation. I'd like to move that Alberni Quayquat Regional District Board of Directors approve the 2025 ACRD Board, Hospital Committee, and Financial Plan meeting schedule as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Coots. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Alrighty, that brings us to item G, landfill environmental testing services. Jenny, please go ahead.
Yes, so we are looking for the board to resolve to award landfill services to ALS Canada. The contract is relatively small. It's $15,000 and a bit per year for 3 years. We do landfill testing, collection and monitoring on an annual basis, and this is just part of our procurement process to make sure we're getting the best value for that service. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Dr. Boyko, go ahead.
What exactly are they testing?
So we do leachate, we do all the groundwater. We've got a series of, I think, over 30 sites that we test on a quarterly basis. And then we do a full workup of metals, but a lot of the indicators like sodium and chloride for landfill indicators in the groundwater to make sure that we don't have leachate going off site.
Perfect, thank you. So we're not doing landfill gas with this. This is just water testing? Correct. So just on landfills for a second, I had an interesting discussion with a business owner yesterday. They are not allowed to recycle in Port Alberni. Why is that? And if we're going to go down the path of increasing diversion in this town, why are businesses not allowed to recycle? And if that is a huge portion of the stuff that goes in our landfill, why are we not looking at that, petitioning the government, and moving forward with that? I just want to have a quick discussion and why that is. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to limit discussion to a response and then a response.
That's appropriate because we also have the Recycle BC contract coming up. So, and I'll just, because we're about to talk about it anyhow, I'll do a quick explanation. So stewardship programs work in that the producers of materials are responsible under provincial regulation to pay money to have that end product recycled. So it is the provincial government, they set up all these different laws. So when you're buying a television, you pay $25 eco fee. The big one is the residential recycling, and we all see that get collected at the curb, or we can go drop it off at the depots, and that's covered under the Recycle BC contract. Now that excludes the commercial stream. This is a frustration for the ACRD especially. In the Lower Mainland, there hasn't been a lot of push against that because there's so much basically big recycling companies that take care of it. So we've been lobbying for at least 5-10 years to try and get that changed, and we continue to do that. We send the resolutions to UBCM, and so we're trying to change that because we realize that and agree. In the interim, what we have set up is at the landfill, you can recycle because a business's options, because they're required to pay for their recycling, is that they hire a contractor to come and pick it up. And the smaller shops don't even want to do that because the cost to pay for a bin and tip it doesn't make sense. So we've set up another option at the landfill where you can come and self-haul, but you do have to pay a tipping fee for that because there is a cost for us. We have to pay to have another company come get it because it's not allowed to be mixed in with the residential. I hope that's clear. It's a bit of a complicated situation.
That's a provincial reg as well? Yeah, that's confirmed. Do you have a response at all? Or follow-up?
I think we should focus a lot on that and not on single family rural residential homes. Thank you.
Yeah, ICI seems to be a real sticking point because of the way the math works. So that's a message heard. It's gonna be mostly advocacy right now, though. Director Steer, please go ahead.
Yes, if I can make the motion that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors award the landfill environmental testing services contract to ALS Canada Limited in the amount of $15,647.63, excluding GST, per year in a three-year term, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the contract on behalf of the ACRD.
Okay, seconded by Director Roth. And any further comments? Is seeing none. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item H, the Recycle BC contract renewal. Please go ahead.
And with that excellent segue, this is for our residential packaging and printed paper contract with Recycle BC. So Recycle BC collects money and they provide that to us as a matter of course, and they're a private company that does that under the regulations to the province. As a matter of course, they will assess what the costs are. They have contracts with all of the local governments in BC. They provide us money for the cost of managing that material. So that includes all of our depots at 3rd Avenue, the landfill. We have Banfield Transfer Station, and then as well as our collection contract. So we've got one for the West Coast where we collect recycling, as well as in Beaver Creek and Picasset and Sachat. So we receive money back to basically subsidize those costs. Recycle BC has done an extensive assessment of costs, and we're are proposing an increase for the next 5 years. So we will be seeing, especially at our depots, an adjustment, which is good because we've seen increased costs, not just in our regional area, but across the board on those costs. So we're seeing an adjustment that's going to go up from about $100,000 to $194,000. And we will see the curbside collection contract amount increase as well. So that is good. And we are recommending that we continue our contract with Recycle BC. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Steer, then Director Boyko.
Thank you. I was just going to make the motion, but unless Director Boyko has a comment, I can hold off.
We'll come back to you. Go ahead, Director Boyko.
So I always urge caution when we say it's good that we're increasing taxes to taxpayers. So Beaver Creek is what I'm familiar with, even though I don't live there, but I live close to there. They pay extra for Recycle BC. Is that fee to the taxpayer on the individual basis going to be doubling with what we're proposing here right now? Is that correct?
Thank you for asking the clarifying question. It's the opposite. So the amount of money that we get, it's a payment to us from Recycle BC to cover the cost for our contracts. So, but right now we pay for all of our depot operations, and then we receive checks from Recycle BC. At the depots, it's actually based on volume. So we get paid per volume of material, and each of the materials is different on what they get paid for because of the different processing and handling costs. And then in the curbside collection program, we basically get a payment per household. So for every household that we have, we get paid based on that. These are standard rates across the province. The only variation is like density. So if it's a denser area, the rates are actually a little bit lower that you would get paid. And if you're more rural, because it's a slightly higher cost.
Does this make our recycling depots more revenue neutral now, or are we still paying money to recycle?
We are moving in the right direction. Yes, because most of the costs, especially like 3rd Avenue is the easiest example, right? It really just does residential recycling materials there, right? So it's kind of a one-stop thing. We're getting actually very close to receiving all of our cost recovery there. And it's unfortunate because we're more rural and we're not processing the volumes that we see in the other areas. When they do the cost analysis and estimate, they have to average it out. And so part of that is about incentivizing us to become more efficient, which we continue to try to do.
Thank you. I see Director Sparrow. Director Steer, please go ahead, and then Director Sparrow.
Yeah, maybe I'll just make the motion and then we can have further discussion. That the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors approve entering into a new 5-year master service agreement and statement of work with Recycle BC for curbside and depot recycling collection effective January 1st, 2025 until December 31st, 2029, and authorize the CIO and board chair to sign the agreements on behalf of the regional district.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director McEwen. Director Sparrow, comment?
Thank you. What you've been saying, it sounds like Beaver Creek recycling is almost cost neutral. So if other areas, rural areas, and I'm thinking of Cherry Creek, if they went into the blue bin thing, if they could, and it was almost cost neutral, it'd almost be powerful. So if there's a way of doing that, that'd be deeply appreciated. Then we can get further away from the numbers we need to get to and putting stuff into the landfill.
So the incentive structure is interesting though, so that's a conversation that the rural areas will need to have, because I think, and Jenny can correct me if I'm wrong, Beaver Creek is on a by volume measurement, not a per household. Is that kind of how it works? It's not?
So there is a catch with Beaver Creek. So I'm really glad it's brought up because Beaver Creek, when it came on board, it was when the program was first established. And so they're grandfathered in, but there are different rules now that Recycle BC has established for areas to participate in recycling to get the money. And so what they are saying is that you have to have 2 years of existing service and you must have a garbage collection service in place. The reason they say that is because what they find is in areas where there isn't garbage collection and you only have a blue bin that goes out, the blue bin is filled with garbage. So they have contamination rates that are so high that it defeats the purpose of recycling. And so where they've seen successes is when you have at least 2 streams, preferably 3, right? But at least 1 garbage collection. And if you have curbside garbage collection and you have that in place for a minimum of 2 years, they are happy to look at adding and expanding the service area. That is why we haven't been pushing to get, well, we have tried, but that has been the block. And so it is something we can look at, but if we establish it, we would probably have to pay for the whole cost for a minimum of 2 years, and we would have to have a garbage service go alongside of that, unfortunately.
Go ahead.
So in Beaver Creek, nice, it died again. That's fun. So in Beaver Creek, they have private garbage collection. The same people who do Beaver Creek do Cherry Creek, and Beaver Creek has the blue bins. So they do have a collection agencies that they're private that you can go into. Not everybody has that. You used to have to be 100% garbage collection to start off with. Well, even I know Beaver Creek got grandfathered. So in order for that to happen now, that means all of my area would have to have signed up to a private collection service of some sort. Even if it was a guy on the street picking up garbage. Okay.
So the service has to be compulsory, but who does the service isn't defined, as far as I know. Okay. Okay, this was moved and seconded. Are there any other comments? Delving into the incentive structures might really matter when it comes to advocacy in the future too, so we should have conversations about that as well. Go ahead, Daniel.
Just want to add a follow-up to earlier questions. Just the last time that we got an approved meeting to change the ICI was in September 21st, 2023, UBCM. So we met with the Parliamentary Secretary, Aman Singh, and you were the speaker, and we provided an overview. And so just to Director Boyko's point, we have been lobbying annually at UBCM. This was the last meeting. We didn't get a meeting last year.
But from what I understand, every regional district is short of Metro Van and maybe the capital has been wanting to talk about ICI and how this is all calculated. So this is something that should be looked at, but once again, it's the province whether or not they're willing to move on it. Once again, advocacy. Okay, so with that in mind, all those in favor of the motion? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item I, lease agreement for the Rogers Cell Tower at the West Coast Landfill, Okay, thank you, Jenny. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're looking for the board to approve an amendment to the existing lease agreement for the cell tower at the West Coast Landfill. The amendment will allow for a rent credit. So we need power upgrades at the West Coast Landfill. Right now, we're working with a very old generator that often breaks down. And due to budgetary constraints, we've been delayed in doing our power upgrades. However, because of the cell tower and the needs for their power service, we are looking at doing some cost sharing. And Rogers is willing and able to basically install that, and we can do cost sharing as a rent credit. So that allows them to upfront the costs, and then we can just rebate it off of their lease payments for 3 years. I'm happy to answer any question.
Dr. Steer, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, I'll make the motion that the ACRD Board of Directors approve an amended lease agreement with Rogers Communication for a cellular tower at the West Coast landfill, effective from July 31st, 2022 to July 31st, 2027, with 3 5-year renewal terms for an annual fee of $17,000, including rent credit to a maximum value of $50,000, to allow equal cost sharing of power upgrades, and authorize the CAO to negotiate and execute the contract on behalf of the ACRD.
Thank you. Seconded by Director McEwen. Any further comment? Dr. Boyd.
So I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So right now there's single phase power out there and everything works properly. Now we're looking at subsidizing 3-phase power out there for the cell phone tower that might be used by the landfill in the future. I just want to elaborate on that a little bit, because things work now, but you're shaking your head at me like they don't work. And now we want to get 3-phase power out there, which allows you to have higher horsepower motors at a cheaper electrical price, but the motors could be more expensive. And I know the VFDs are a lot more expensive. So I just want to elaborate a little bit of this, because it's like we're getting something that we might not need and we're getting free cell phone tower.
No problem. Happy to provide more details. So we need 3-phase power to the landfill. That is the first chunk of the service. And then the Rogers Tower is beyond. They need single-phase power to their tower. So they have to do electrical upgrades anyhow. But we actually need three-phase power for the organics processing facility that we've already constructed. We knew that was part of the budget, but we were really limited in our budget, and we actually had to scale back a lot of the work that we did. And so we were phasing it. We sourced out a very old and aging generator for an interim solution until we could basically build up our capital to upgrade and put in the 3-phase power. It is continuing to fail, and I don't know actually how much longer it's going to last, but luckily, because when we run the blowers, it's in batches. So it's okay if it fails once in a while, but it's not a long-term sustainable solution. The other thing is that we know we have to do leachate upgrades. So that's another project in the future, which will also require 3-phase power. But for the current situation, we do need 3-phase power for the blowers and equipment that we already have installed on site.
Quick follow-up. So we're going to see some future cost upgrades of that landfill for transformers, motors, all that kind of stuff as well. Like, this is phase 1 of the cost, but there'll be a lot more coming to the West Coast landfill in the future years, correct?
There will be some, yes. And as we do the work at the landfill, we have to do that. This is one portion of that, and that's getting the 3-phase power to the fence line. And then also Rogers is doing, which is not a shared cost for us. Their single-phase power that they're doing beyond is just on them, but we're sharing the upgrade costs to the fence line.
All right, thank you. Are there any other comments? I see none. Was it moved and seconded? I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was? Oh, yes. Okay. With that in mind, all those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item J, ECCC proposed regulations. Please go ahead, Jenny.
Yes, this report went to the Alberni Valley and Bamfield Services Committee in September and was presented in detail. The committee supported staff writing a letter and advocating to address some of the concerns that we've raised. So the federal government is looking to implement new regulations around landfill gas because it is such a huge contribution to climate change, about 19%. However, the challenges from our perspective is that it doesn't align with the regulations that the province has put in place. And so they have been asking for feedback from all of the regional districts. We have provided that. And the committee also recommended that we send a letter. So we have drafted a letter that has outlined our big concerns that is getting sent to the federal government as well as our local representatives. Happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Haggard, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think it was a very well-written letter, and I think it really captured what we had said at the meeting. So I'd like to move that the Alberni Claycott Regional District Board of Directors send a letter regarding proposed landfill methane emission reductions regulation to the federal government and our member of parliament, with copies to the Shuswap First Nation and Hupachasit First Nation, to advocate for the region's concerns and assure they're addressed in the upcoming legislation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Coots. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item K, potential West Bamfield dock acquisition from Transport Canada. Daniel, go ahead.
I think we covered all the bases in the delegation report. I will just reiterate some of the key points. Is that what we're looking to do right now is enter into the pre-transfer contribution agreement with Transport Canada, so that we can access some funding and actually bring in resources. As I indicated earlier, right now this has been off the corner of my desk and with the support of planning. But it is a significant project. It's of clear interest to Bamfield, although an option to do nothing is there. I do believe the risks of doing nothing are too high, and we would want to be involved. By actively engaging, we could actually go get the funding we need and recover those costs, both in terms of the staff we assign and the contractors that we bring in. I will flag that the estimation of project management time, which does include staff time, I say project management in this report because it is not clear yet how we would structure this, whether we would project manage on a staff level or whether we bring in a contractor, and that would be a discussion that we bring forward as a proposed initiative in the budget process. But the estimation of approximately 400 hours is in my view justified, because what you're looking at is a coordination of Transport Canada, the province. You're looking at environmental studies, engineering studies. You're looking at reaching out and having discussions with potential financial investors and partners. You're also potentially looking at the creation of first a feasibility and then a business plan. We're of course having to engage with the existing businesses and interested parties in West Bamfield, and we would also want to be working with Huu-ay-aht in terms of any visioning or discussion. We haven't identified whether this would be a larger regional sort of service that we would potentially look at, or whether it's just specialized to Bamfield. And as such, we're looking at a lot of potential support from community services, planning, admin, finance, and as such, it is, as I flagged, a potentially large project. And so if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. And yeah.
Thank you, Director Steer.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. You pretty much in terms of the project management conversation, but I just wanted to touch on, and I will support the feasibility potential request. I just wanted to point, and as you clearly articulated, we went through this process many years ago, and I do have previously sat on the board of directors of our harbor authority, and have been involved from Haida Gwaii on down to Victoria in terms of these types of divestiture conversations. I just want to say, once we go down this road, then it's like when that snowball starts rolling, it's very hard to stop it. So once it gets rolling, the conversations start getting limited in terms of what those variables are. Anyways, I will support it. There is I would highly suggest that a project manager, the feds will be covering the cost of all this. This is an incredibly complex project. I can tell you what we have done here in Tofino in terms of the acquisition of First Street Dock, which is a very important community amenity. And I heard Director Beckett's, and I understand the complete importance of that facility. I often work right beside it in Bamfield. And so I understand the significance, and I in no way want to diminish that. I just want to be very clear if the ACRD, once we go through this process, if the ACRD has to have very clear understanding of what the ramifications are for taking on that service and what those implications are for this type of facility, with a limited tax base to support that. So I'm going to support it for sure. I'm sure we're all clear that this is a complex project. but the importance of it cannot be underestimated for the communities. I won't just say Bamfield. I will say it is a regional conversation in terms of the importance of it. So I'll leave it there. Well, I see Director Beckett has his hand up, so I'll let him make the motion when it comes up.
Thank you, Director Beckett.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments, Director Steer, and I agree with you 100%. The last thing that our community and the ACRD would want to do is take on a liability that we can't afford, either as a community or as a region. And again, like the sewer referendum, we can't make a decision unless we have the facts, and we can't get the facts unless we get the funding from the feds to do the evaluation. And just to put your mind at ease, we have reached out to our MP to ask the question, if this is not palatable at all, we'll be looking for your support. And he's assured that he would give us that support. So again, those are the conversations that we've had over the last year and a half or longer, because we recognize that we have to take the appropriate steps. So thank you for your comments, sir.
Thank you. Dr. Roth and then Dr. Boyko.
Thank you. So would this result in a referendum ballot to the people? Because I would be much more likely to support something if the people were given the chance to decide. Thank you.
Daniel?
There are many steps to take, and the first would be the feasibility. And so before we get to referendum, similar to the sewer, which we're using as an example, there'd be a lot of community dialogue, that is for sure. If through that dialogue and through decisions of the board, we wanted to proceed beyond just gathering facts, and we wanted to look at potentially taking this on, there are two areas that I feel would likely qualify for referendums. One would be, we need a service that would house this in some way. And typically the way we create these services is through a referendum. So that would be one. Two, if there were to be any financial structures that would require some sort of investment beyond the funds that are being received from the federal government, that would likely also create the formula for referendum. Now, I'm saying all this hypothetically because I don't have the information to tell you where this would land, but I am quite confident in saying that my discussions with Director Beckett have always been, how do we take this back to the community? And I don't see how we would take this back to the community without a referendum. If the answer was somehow a yes, we want to consider this. If the concern I have with not going down this path where we would take something to the community is that if we said, no, we're going to wait and see what happens, there is a chance that a private entity would take it. And the private entity would have no requirement to go to the community. They could take on the asset, take whatever money the federal government provides them to take that asset, and then proceed to set fees for the space that we occupy, where Lady Rose docks and would have to likely pay a docking fee, where we house our garbage and recycling for pickup and would likely have a fee there, would likely have a fee for the Coast Guard and the RCMP that use the dock. Now, it's not to say that we might not end up putting a fee in order to cost recover, but we would have a public process on the establishment of that business process. A private enterprise would not. They would simply run their business case. And that is, I think it's fair to say, Director Beckett, that is the concern that has been the flame beneath our feet for continuing down this path.
One more, just to carry on a little bit further. Does anyone know the annual expense of the other dock or a similar dock? I have no idea what it would cost. Even a ballpark.
I do not have that. Perhaps somebody else does. So
Perfect.
I don't even want to jump in and cause chaos. So if somebody else has better information, I will hand that on.
So, that's a conversation that we can have as a part of the feasibility study if we go ahead with that. And then I can arrange for folks from HGB to give a presentation on our experience with the East Dock, which is different. Just because it's not a dependency model the same way that the West Dock might have. So that's a consideration there. I have Director Steer and then Director LaCourcia.
Yeah, and if you need further, we can give you we have it in it. It's part of our budget process for the maintenance into Pheno, but I don't have those numbers right there. But it is a line item in the budget now, and it is significant on a yearly basis. That being said, I did just want to clarify, and I know that the discussions with Director Beckett and Daniel have been around the potential if we did not have control. And I don't know if things have changed, but we're in divestiture talks for 2 docks into Pheno right now, Transport Canada. And the order, my understanding is the order of in terms of reaching out first to the nations that are involved, and presently the 2 nations are involved in those conversations. Then it goes to local government, then nonprofit, and then to private enterprise as to the order of who they will reach out to first in terms of the control of those and ownership of those docks. I don't know if that's changed, but certainly in our area that has been the order of preference in terms of outreach to the potential local players.
Thank you. Director LaCourcia.
I'm thinking of the dock. I don't know if we have any other docks we own or control. But we're ending up with a marine situation, and we end up with possibly quite a large liability situation. So do we have to get a whole bunch of special insurance for this?
That would be answered as a part of the actual process that's contemplated here. Director Boyko.
Thank you.
Very good question, Director LaCourcier. With regard to Port Alberni Port Authority, has anyone talked to them? Because they do this for a living. They got Centennial Pier, China Creek Campground Marina, and 3 other marinas, docks, floats, and everything else. They have the experience. They probably have the insurance. Why are we looking at starting up a potential service with an inexperienced set of people that could potentially have the local experience already? Thank you.
So I think the port authorities count as private interests for some reason. So I think that's part of, like, they get their chance after a local government's bulk. So that would be the consideration. However, you can put together a consortium of a First Nation local government at Port Authority, and that could be something as well. But you want to do that before it gets the private interest, because then it might be a bid process depending on how the government wants it to be. Go ahead.
So there's a priority of federal government to First Nations that has already said we're not interested in it. Then we're going to local government, which in Banfield would be the ACRD. Then if ACRD would say, hey, we don't want to start up a new service with something we don't know anything about, then it will go to private, even though Port Alberni Port Authority is owned by what? Themselves? I'm pretty sure it's a public
it's like
thing.
a crown though. So it's somewhat arm's length, the way that the governance structures for port authorities work.
My vote would be to send it to the Port Authority because they do this for a living. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I forget if there's anybody else next. None? Okay, so the motion. Oh, go ahead, Director Steer.
Yeah, I was just going to read the motion there unless you were going to do it from the chair.
No, you can do it.
That the Alberta Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors resolve to negotiate a pre-transfer contribution agreement with Transport Canada to fund conducting the due diligence and feasibility work required to consider the options and implications of the potential transfer of the West Banfield dock.
I'll second that.
I was going to ask Director Beckett if he would second that.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, you're okay with that? Okay, thanks. Any further comments?
Quick final question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do all costs associated with this, are they all grant, or do they all go to Banfield, or does it go to everybody in the ACRD?
I think that's defined in the agreement, and I think it's the ACRD, and then we can decide where it goes.
That's correct. So it'd be the ACRD. We decide where it goes based on our structuring the agreement, our structuring the project, which is why part of the next steps will be the discussion around budget, how we want to structure.
So potentially the rural areas that don't even touch water would be paying for a dock somewhere else. Is that correct?
No, you wouldn't be paying. That's the whole intent, is that we'd be covering all those costs through this process. What they do is, from what I've been told, is we tell them we're prepared to advance with the agreement. And we talk about the phasing of funds to do the due diligence. We identify the key steps that are involved with our estimate on those key steps, and they provide the upfront funding to start that process. If once bids come back in to adjust those costs, they have told Bob and I that we are to go back to them to provide updates because they can provide additional funding. This process is meant to cover all of our costs as we do our due diligence.
So there is no way that Beaufort, Beaver Creek, Cherry Creek, Sproat Lake could pay for this?
There should not be any expenses to your areas. And so I'll be cautious in how I say that. There's always opportunity costs. So if the board was to say, we want staff to do it, there's an opportunity cost for you because we're limited in staff. But I'd be surprised if that occurred. I mean, there's a number of shared priorities here that we all want to get done.
So just to answer your question, is that the only way that that could happen is if your communities wanted to. The reason why it goes to the ACRD first is because there's no such thing as Bamfield. There's no such thing as Beaufort. There's no such thing as Cherry Creek. It's the ACRD. That's the legal entity that handles all of that. That's why regional districts exist. So yeah, it would have to be a new service anyway. So there'd be a whole process for that. So the only way that you would pay for the Bamfield dock, West Bamfield dock, is if you wanted to. Yeah. That's a good question, though. It's a good way to like make sure that everyone is aware of that.
It's good that that was said in a public meeting, and hopefully it stays binding for eternity.
Yep. I don't think the province is ever going to change that. I don't see anything better than regional districts out there. Some counties in some states in the US are run pretty well, but that's a different thing entirely. Director Beckett, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to reiterate what Daniel had said, that and it speaks to the director for the area, me, having no interest whatsoever in assuming any financial responsibility in doing the evaluation. And getting back to Director Steer's comment about on the surface what appears to be the prioritized pecking order for the feds to turn these assets over, and yet it was actual private enterprise that started this process almost 2 years ago, which created that concern that I had for what happens if we lose that asset to a private business person, even though, and you're absolutely right, Director Steer, the intent was that it would be given to First Nations first, then, community government, et cetera, but, regardless of what that priority is, the reality is that the feds are motivated to eliminate their own liability. So I just wanted to say that in our preliminary discussions with Transport Canada staff, we've been really clear about what our expectations are on everything from the plan, from the cost to create a business plan, from the cost to do an engineering study. All of that, we've made it really clear that our assumption is that the ACRD and specifically the Bamfield taxpayers will not bear any of those costs. I've made that really clear. So I share Director Boyko's concerns for us assuming the responsibility for that as well.
Thank you, Director Beckett. So this has been moved and seconded as far as I can tell, unless I accidentally circled the motion too early. Okay, with that in mind, I will ask all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And that brings us to the last item in section 8, the community workforce response grant application. So Alex, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. This is a grant application for a fully funded project in partnership with North Island College and the Hupechesith First Nation on a training program for greenhouse workers. And the ACRD has partnered with the North Island College on a number of grant funded skills programs over the past 4 years. We did a farm worker foundation and market gardener, a seafood processing, and 2 meat processing courses in the past. So this course would achieve a goal of increasing the number of trained commercial greenhouse workers available in the community and to encourage the development of greenhouse businesses. The grant would cover all costs for students to participate in the program, including their tuition, their supplies, and their additional supports that they need, such as childcare and travel. The grant program also provides additional funding for the ACRD to manage the grant, which we would administer and work with the grant partners. So staff recommend the board support the grant application and direct staff to proceed as required. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Any comments or questions or motions? Dr. Blicko, go ahead.
I'd like to make the motion that the Alberta Clay-Claw Regional District Board of Directors support the grant application to the Community Workforce Response Grant for the Greenhouse Growers Program and direct staff to provide overall grant management for the project if successful.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Everyone. Thank you, Dr. Siga. Okay, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so that's going to bring us into planning matters, but since we're coming up on 3 hours, I'm going to call a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 4:30 because I really need to use the washroom. All right, thanks. Okay, it looks like we're pretty close to 4:30. So this will be your 1-minute warning. The next start in half an hour, apparently.
So does our EOC training.
They might have to go downstairs, so I'm just saying. Okay. Emergency operation. Okay, so with that in mind, that brings us into planning matters. So we do need to keep quorum. So those of you in Indigenous and municipalities, please stick around, bare minimum, because we can't get through this without you.
May
Go ahead, Lavana.
yeah, I'm definitely still here, so I just want to put that on.
Okay, no, if you're connected, we'll count you as here. I know that you have infant things to attend to, so no, that's well understood. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so with that in mind, we have item A, and Alex, please take us through it. This is an item for Beaver Creek.
Thank you very much. This is a development variance application relating to a 3-lot subdivision on Walker Road. The variance would reduce the side yard setbacks on proposed lots A and B to allow for the siting of the 2 existing houses on the property as the new lot lines are created. The property was rezoned earlier this year to facilitate the subdivision, and the variance is one of the applicant's final steps in completing that subdivision. The Beaver Creek Advisory Planning Commission considered the application at their November 18th meeting, where the APC supported the variance as presented. At this time, staff recommend that the board consider the variance application and proceed with the neighbor notification process to gather input before making a final decision. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Susan, I'll let you finish chewing if you want to.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I'll make the motion that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors consider issuing development variance DVE 24014, subject to neighbor notification as per Local Government Act Section 499.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Sparrow. Any comments? Seeing none, go ahead, Director Siga.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering about the size of the lots and whether they're connected to sewer or whether septic needs to be involved. A system has to be put in. Thanks.
Alex?
Yeah, great question. So the size of the lots will be under an acre, but they are handled with on-site sewage disposal. And the remainder lot at the rear would be larger, but it's all connected to community water with individual on-site septic.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. That brings us to item B, another rezoning application for Beaver Creek. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much. This rezoning application is for a property located at 6525 Plested Road, and it's to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision. The board gave 3 readings to bylaw P 1481 for this application in July after completing the public input process. When the board first considered the bylaw, it was confirmed that adoption would be subject to confirmation that the property can accommodate sewage disposal to a 0.24 hectare minimum lot size. The applicants have now submitted a report from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that confirms that sewage disposal can be dealt with appropriately, and all conditions of rezoning have been satisfied, and staff recommends that the board adopt the bylaw.
Thank you. Susan or Dr. Roth, do you want to go?
Sure, I move that bylaw P 1481 Regional District of Alberni Clayoquot Zoning Atlas Amendment bylaw be adopted.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Item C, Beaver Creek once more. It looks like different part of rezoning. Please go ahead, Alex.
Yes, thank you very much. This rezoning is for a property located at 5522 Maple Street, and it is to allow for a cottage residential development, which would allow for up to 4 small footprint rental cottages in addition to the existing house. So the board last considered this application on August 28th, where the board resolved to proceed with the second public input process. As a bit of background, in May, the board had previously received 5 letters from the neighbors expressing opposition to this development. Following that meeting, the applicant provided additional information to support their application, and they presented as a delegation in August. So a revised site plan was provided, which demonstrates the potential siting for 4 cottages with adequate access and parking on site. An assessment from a wastewater professional was submitted, which confirms that on-site sewage disposal can be provided to the cottages in compliance with island health regulations. The applicants also provided a letter from a professional engineer, which discusses the site drainage, and they have also agreed to an additional condition of rezoning that would require the installation of an engineered stormwater detention and drainage system as part of any cottage development, and that this requirement would be secured by restrictive covenant. So in August, the board resolved to proceed with the second public notice process. Given the additional information on this application, that process has now been completed, and we do have 3 letters of correspondence that have been received, one of which is included as a late item on your agenda. The letters reiterate opposition for the rezoning, noting concerns about site drainage, stormwater runoff, septic, parking, noise, and the potential for increased traffic. The letters raise concerns that were expressed during the first notice period. In consideration of the new information and the professional assurances that were provided by the applicant that intend to mitigate some of those technical concerns and the additional covenant requirement for the engineered stormwater management, staff do recommend that the board proceed with 3 readings of bylaw P 1494 at this time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Roth, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Given the correspondence received by the board in opposition to the rezoning in the 2 rounds of public notification, and that the proposed restrictive covenant does not adequately address the concerns raised by residents living in the area, I move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors deny rezoning application RE 23011.
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Boyko. Further comment? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, thank you. So that means we don't really have to do any of that other stuff. So, okay, thank you for that. Next item is item D regarding the rezoning for, oh, it's a report bylaw. Please go ahead, Alex.
Thank you very much. So item D is a application to rezone the property at 5663 Mercy Road. This application is in the Beaver Creek area as well, and this rezoning would facilitate a 3-lot subdivision. The subdivision would create 1 lot accessed off of Mercy with the existing house, and 2 vacant lots accessed off the east end on Strick Road. The Beaver Creek APC considered the application on November 18th, where they supported the proposal and recommended that the board.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm sorry, we're in a meeting. You're gonna have to take that somewhere else. No, I'm sorry. That's not how this works. I'm sorry. Ma'am, it was denied already. Okay, sorry. Were we a bit too mumbly, but the motion was denied. Okay. Thank you for trying to help, Cindy. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, Dr. Roth. The presentation was made. It is your floor if you'd like to make a motion.
Sure. I move that the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors consider first reading of bylaw P 1517, Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District Zoning Atlas Amendment Bylaw at a future date, and that notice be given in accordance with section 467 of the Local Government Act. Should I read the whole motion?
No, it's 2 separate motions, so you're right. Okay, do I have a seconder? Anyone? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in, oh, Dr. Siga, go ahead. You're totally muted though.
Sorry about that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I think this is the one where there's a creek on that property as well, isn't there? And I'm just wondering, that's not the one with the creek?
I don't know.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, no, there is no creek on this property. There is a 3-lot subdivision. The proposal, the land that would be subdivided is relatively level. The east end is not cleared, but there's no water course identified on it.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. All right, please go ahead, Dr. Roth.
I move that the Alberni Clayoquot Regional District Board of Directors confirm that adoption of bylaw P1517 is subject to confirmation from a registered on-site wastewater practitioner that the parcel can accommodate on-site sewage disposal to a 0.24 hectare minimum lot size and meeting all technical referral agency requirements.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. All right, so that ends planning. Thank you, Alex. That brings us into reports. 10.1 are staff reports. Would anyone, including the CAO, like to pull anything out?
I can just flag, in terms of the surveillance policy update, there were questions about the locations, and I'll just flag that the report covers those locations and covers the fact that the proper requirements have been followed for those, with regards to having the commissioner review and have the proper plans in place, so that we're compliant with that.
Thank you. Would anyone like to pull anything else out or move to receive the reports? Please.
I like to move that the Board of Directors receive the staff reports A through C.
Thank you. Seconded by Dr. Coots. Thank you, Dr. Haggard, for moving. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. All right, that brings us to committee reports, 10.2, of which there are none. Member reports, 10.3. That brings us to item A, 911 Corporation. Dr. Beckett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, we had an in-camera meeting regarding staff and Eric. Now I can report out that Eric Mulder is the new manager of technology for 911. Our next general meeting is Friday of this week. No report.
Thank you for that. Next up is Vancouver Island Regional Library. Did Dr. Cote leave anything behind?
No report.
Thank you. Item C, Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce. Dr. Minions. Or Dr. Haggard.
The Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce is having their Small Business Excellence Awards on Friday night, and I will be attending on behalf of the city and the regional district.
Thank you. Eric, go ahead.
I thought I was the alternate for the Alberni Chamber of Commerce, but I guess we'll deal with that later.
He just asked me because Director Minions did not respond, so I was just filling in for her.
Okay, that brings us to Air Quality Council. Dr. Sparrow.
Thank you. My computer's running again. It just decides how break was long. So Alberni Air Quality Council update. So the radio public service announcements are going great. October 2024, so the largest number of users of any month in any record, and it's 3 times higher than the average months for 2022. They're looking at ways of facilitating transfer of waste wood from forest harvesting areas, sites to catalysts to try to get down on these slash burning areas that are around the valley. And recently our Purple Air Network quality motors have become functional. There was a few that were down. So they're looking at other places to put them, some at Cherry Creek and further out into the rural area to see what a better reading they can get for the air quality around here. That's about it for now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, AVICC, Dr. Cote is not here, so no report?
No report.
Thank you. So walk-in public advisory group, Dr. Sparrow.
Back again. So Tawaska, they have an overview of their harvesting and key operation challenges, changes, and any environmental incidents that they have occurred. They did a burning presentation of the science of burning, which is kind of contradictory to the last place I was at. Planning reforestation, and they have a program of endorsement of forest certification. It's a worldwide thing. And they're updating the upcoming implementation of PEFC Canadian Standard presentation, to include history of certification, locations in the world, and Canada leads the world by area. And the replacement of the CSA standards to the PEFC standards. So it's ongoing, so we'll be at higher quality, so we'll be able to do all that. And the PFC is expected to be formally endorsed by December 2024, and there'll be a 12 to 18-month transition period for registrants implementing the program. So we'll be able to do their Forest Council certifications on a worldwide basis, so.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are there any other member reports? So I have one member report that I'd like to put. I think it counts as a member report. At some point in the last year, I have permission to join a Natural Resources Council for local governments on Vancouver Island. Now that the provincial government has been established, I would expect that this group would become active once more. So I'll be going to those meetings and advocating on behalf of natural resource-based communities, given the importance of making sure that that moves forward. No meetings have been set yet, but reactivation was pending the government. And I think because it's this government, they will get more active as a result. So could we have a motion to receive the member reports? Thank you, Director Coots and Director Boyko. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. All right, no unfinished business. That brings us into the late business. We're going to do a weather event roundtable from what had occurred 3 weeks ago, no? 4 weeks, 3 weeks. Dr. Boyko, let's start with you if you want to.
Yes, thank you. 8 days ago.
Was it 8 days ago?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
So I'll be quick because I know everyone's getting late here, but there's some important points here. So out in this area, we had a weather event, a bomb cyclone, whatever word you want to call it, category 1 hurricane, whatever. It affected lots of different areas, different places, but many places were out of power for extended periods of time. So I'm just going to experience what happened in Beaufort. Many places, most places were without power for 4 to 5 days. I saw lots of neighbors helping neighbors cutting down trees, clearing roads, people going to different places for showers. After a few days, fridges are thrown out if you don't have electricity. All these kind of things were happening. And it went good. So what worked? Starlink worked very well. I think we should have one here. We talked about that last meeting with the emergency council. And generators worked and wood stoves. That's it. So it would be a good idea for EOC recommendations that we say have certain things at your house, especially if you're in the rural areas: wood stove, generators, spare gas, chainsaws to cut yourself out. Many kids did not make it to school on Wednesday because they could not, including people in my immediate area. Obviously, electric heat did not work. So there are many people that are regretting taking their wood stoves out and going to heat pumps because their houses went down to 7 to 8 degrees Celsius by the 4th day, which if you have young children and elderly people is actually getting dangerous. So we had families sleeping in places they're not used to because of these problems. So on, I think Friday night, I don't know if we declared a state of emergency, but we activated EOC. But some questions came up as why was the electoral area directors not contacted about this until after the fact? And did we allow entry into properties without a warrant based on things like this? And why are the EEA directors not allowing the EOC to offer advice? So the area that was chosen for the rescue squad to go out to was a good area, but there are also areas that could have been done based if we had local knowledge with someone that actually lives in the area, but that was not allowed or provided. So moving forward, there's lots of lessons learned, but asking the people that live in these rural areas to support things that say you cannot have a wood stove and you have to have electric everything and electrify your vehicles. We would have, if this went on for a couple more days, we would have had people in serious danger over there. Thank you. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'll go next if we'll just go around this way, if that's okay. So on the Huyat side of things, I think the most salient item was that the Banfield Road flooded in the Sarita area, and there was untimely death. Those floods and this weather event are somewhat related. We are currently tackling the flooding that happened in a way that is related to how this may work. The Anakla community was without power for several days as well. So I do think that a reiteration of the kind of 72-hour preparation conversation is needed. And this does underline the importance of having kind of off-grid capacity for that, at least that 72-hour period. So like you said, wood stoves, propane, there's no natural gas out here, so I guess that's not an option. Is there in town? Okay, I meant to not clip, but yeah, and so that idea is that there's an importance for that kind of redundancy when it comes to that. I do think though that these conversations, when it comes to the Banfield Road and trees down, that's a further thing that we need to discuss between Huyat, the forestry partners, Banfield and the ACRD and the provincial government. And now that there is a government, we'll be able to have those conversations more vehemently. That being said, Highway 4 is once again an issue because it was closed as well, and then it was restricted as well. So conversations around emergency routes as well as alternate routes is something that's going to be very key, that the Minister of Transportation is going to hear from us nonstop, at least on a Huyat basis. So from that perspective, I think things handled fairly well. We were preparing to bring some of our elders to the Alberni Valley and get them hotel rooms. And we didn't have to because, well, when we started the work on that, the power came back on. So that was okay. But there is a conversation around not just the redundancy of different energy systems, but also the dependability of the power grid as well. Because we're getting really close to the limitations of the power grid as it exists on a distribution basis. I think it's okay from a transmission basis, but I don't really care about that. Because I think Dunsmuir will be able to handle it. But I do have concerns around how that's going to look in the future, and that feels like it's an AVICC problem. That's something that we can all advocate together on that. I'll leave it at that. We'll go to Director Haggard if you want.
Thank you, Chair Jack. I just want to say thank you to the staff at both the ACRD and the city for opening up the OC Center so quickly, and also for setting up accommodations at Echo Center for anyone that was stranded. And also want to give a shout out to the Beaver Creek Fire Department for also assisting and help setting up the accommodations at Echo, and for the Salvation Army for their food. So this is another example of different organizations working together and making things happen very quickly. So thank you everyone so much.
Thank you for that. Director Lucrecia?
We were really happy we had a generator. We had it set up quite a few years ago, and we got the opportunity to use it. Not that I wanted to. Our power was out for about 6 hours, but you never know when it's going to come back on. So we also have a propane stove, so we fired that up and we got some side heat. So I was really glad we had that as well. Some of our neighbors didn't have a generator, so they did suffer for a little bit of cold for a while. But 6 hours wasn't too bad, so we were fortunate there that's all. We had some trees that fallen, but nothing serious, nothing really too big, so we're happy with that. I'm always concerned about trees because we have quite a few trees around our house. I like trees. I don't want to cut them down, but sometimes probably have to get rid of a few. But anyway, this time we didn't lose any trees. So I was quite happy about that. But it is a concern. The power goes off. It is a concern. But at least I think it's a good idea to get a generator in places like this, especially as we live at Sprott Lake, and we seem to lose power every time there's a big wind because so many trees around. So anyway, that's what I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Sparrow, please go ahead.
Well, thank you. Yeah, our power outage wasn't that bad, just a couple hours, well, off and on a few times, but thinking about it now, I'm probably the youngest the person I know in my neighborhood, which doesn't bode well, really, does it? So if there was outage for 4 or 5 days, the whole neighborhood would definitely be in a sorry state. Some do have wood stoves, but not all have wood stoves. So All in all, we fared pretty well compared to the rural areas. I know Cherry Creek did pretty good. There were some areas, the end of Consexus and Batty, which are actually Beaufort area, but yeah, they didn't fare as well. They were out for quite a few days too, because Consexus is a bad place for trees to come down, but all in all, I think you guys did a good job. You opened up your, you'll see if you had to open them up, and you did get a number this time, I hope. So because last time we had it open up, and then we have that resolution going to ABCC about that too. So that's good. Hopefully in the future we can get through these problems. That's all I got.
Director Coots, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, yes, Ho Chocolate would just like to echo the thankings and the hand raisings to staff and all of the different user groups that have come together to make all this happen at such short notices. These are difficult times that we go through, and as we can see, we are only going to be seeing more and more of these. It's a great learning opportunity to see what works. It's always wonderful to hear everybody's experiences and what works best for them. And we, as Wachukla said, we, for lack of a better term, lucked out to a certain degree in the fact that a lot of our members live in Port Alberni. We have a very short population that lives inside of our village, and just due to circumstances and timeframes, we already had a few other things on the go. So we had our staff going out on a very short notice to go out and do the boat trip down to pick people up from the village and bring them back before the storm had even hit. And we had a lot of our outreach workers, our nurses and our human services departments going out to our community members who are unhoused and things like that. So it's just, we really thank everybody for all the hard work that they've done. And we look forward to the positive outcomes that'll come from this. Thank you. Chu.
Thank you, Director Coots. Next up, we'll go with Dr. Siga and then Dr. Roth.
Thank you. Yeah, my power was out over 2 days, so I was starting to worry about my fridge. So I'm definitely going to have a generator next time around. But my wood stove fares me really well for heat and the candles for light. So, and we're used to it. And I just wanted to acknowledge that BC Hydro did have, I saw 4 trucks attacking one area all at the same time. So they certainly did a good job getting us up and running. The interesting thing was I didn't even think about the electricity to the pumps for the water supply. And that eventually could have been a problem for Millstream. But I think we did well. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Dr. Roth and then Director Beck.
Thank you. We've had storms like this in the past, and I remember them clearly, and that's why we have a generator, and it worked really well. In my area, the power was out just over 12 hours, but in other areas outside, but in Beaver Creek, it was much like Director Boyko's description of everything. So definitely have a generator if you can afford one. I know they're expensive, but it's sure worth it. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Roth. Director Beckett and then Director Steer.
Thank you. Like Director Siga, I'd like to shout out to BC Hydro, not only from the island, but the fact that they sent resources over from the mainland in anticipation of the event. And, you know, when I think of Anakla and Bamfield with a very small population, the amount of resources they get down there in a very timely fashion is very much appreciated. We too did have considerable time without power, especially on the west side, which is a bit more difficult to get to, which you know, leads me to ask the question, you know, is there any kind of community program that we could take advantage of to buy generators at a discount and sell them back to the community so that our community could leverage something a little bit cheaper? I mean, there's grants for everything, you know, from compost stuff. I mean, I can go on and on and on that we try to take advantage of for our communities. But I agree with Director Boyko and others that having a generator is, you know, it can be a lifesaver, you know, and especially when it comes to your fridges and freezers. So I would really like and appreciate if staff could look into, you know, those type of programs. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Quickly, Director Coots.
If staff would like a motion for what Director Boyko has suggested, I would happily second that. Clarko.
Well, yeah, is that okay?
Yes. So the motion would be to modify our safety stuff to be from a 72-hour list to have water and candles and clothing and some food, to include things that are more life-saving, because our emergencies are going beyond 72 hours, to include things like wood stoves and generators and spare gas with fuel stabilizers and all these kind of important things, and chainsaws. Just so you know, Log Train Trail is now cleared by the quad bearers. There was hundreds of trees down. Thank you. I'm going to give them a shout out.
Yeah, I read about that. So moved and seconded. Is that something that, any comments on that one specifically? Oh, sorry, Lavana, please go ahead.
Yeah, apologies. I thought it was a round table, and didn't realize I needed to put up my hand. So yes, thank you. Just a little bit of a review from what happened with Ucluelet. We also experienced a lot of trees that had came down. One of the challenges was running out of diesel with our generator for our government office, which we use as our emergency place for a warming center and as a kitchen to feed elders. And so there were some real challenges there. Even though we have this huge generator for the government office, we did run out of diesel, and we were impacted by the trees and getting them out. And power lines that went down as well. So there's some very, very low hanging power lines that we recently got them put higher in the last year, but they've still presented to be really challenging. So yeah, our community is going to be working on banding together and seeing how we can make these improvements for the next big storm that may happen. We did just hire an emergency coordinator, and we're going to be having that coordinator work closely with everyone in the community and the government office with how we can better prepare. But just wanted to echo that those were challenges. That's what we came faced with. Even though we have these generators, it wasn't a huge, it didn't save us in all scenarios. And agreed, there was some frustration with a lot of the citizens that had converted to heat pumps, and we made them, take out their wood furnaces in order to get those heat pumps. So there's going to be some discussions on the table about that. And I'm an advocate for alternative heat. I think our houses, especially for the reasons that we saw with this storm, we should have that opportunity of having alternative heat. But yeah, that's just where we're at, and we're going to work to make everyone safe for the next time around.
Thank you, Dr. Mastrangelo. I have Dr. Steer and then Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Tofino did, similar to Ucluelet down the road, encounter a number of challenges. We also had some major trees come down that actually separated town from, I live out just outside of town, and we weren't able to access. So there was a number of emergency operations concerns. That being said, I do want to first just give a shout out to the community as a general, and I think Director Boyko and several of the other directors have mentioned the importance of community, and we are so fortunate in the areas that we work, how everybody did come together to help one another. Certainly out in Tofino, in our neighborhoods, that was definitely the case. Neighbors helping neighbors. Government can do a lot, but at the end of the day, as communities, that support was it was paramount in our area. And so at the district level, oh, somebody just walked in. At the district level, we are going through a debrief now. There are a number, and I think Director Beckett, you had alluded to how we want to look at those things that we did well and those things that we can improve upon in a positive light and in a civil conversation. And so that's what we're in the process now internally at the district, and that will come forward. Anecdotally, the community certainly, mentioned the things that could be done better, and some of the things that did go well. And so we're going to reflect on those and bring those forward because we know that these events are going to continue, and all the mitigation work that we preemptively do went a long way this time to take care of some of those major issues around infrastructure that were a major concern. I do want to echo Chair Jack in terms of the work and the advocacy we might be able to do through AVICC in terms of some of the power issues that I think could be addressed at that larger regional level through the AVICC. And I think that's critical. We have a great relationship specifically with BC Hydro here, and those conversations early on definitely went a long way to mitigate some of the big issues that happened out here. I'll leave it there, and it was it was quite the event.
Thank you. I have Director Johnson and her cat, and
yeah, Tokwat had power outage for about 52 hours, I think, and we have a number, I don't know how many, I live here in Ucluelet, a number of generators that we were able to distribute to citizens. The older houses have wood stoves, and the newer ones don't, so people had to use their generators for their little heaters who didn't have the fireplaces. Yeah, we work together as a team. We have our public works people out delivering the generators and stuff. So it wasn't great, but we got through it.
all right, thank you. I have Director McEwen and then Director Minions.
Thank you. The District of Ucluelet was out of power for 36 hours. We have a generator and we have a propane fireplace and a propane stove. So that kept some heat and some food cooking. I have a friend, just to give you an example of a horrible situation. A friend had his daughter at the rec hall, which on Tuesday nights they have roller skating and skateboarding. And just as the power went out, his daughter was injured quite badly because the skateboard hit her in the stomach. And he had to get her to the hospital, and they got as far as the junction, and there was a huge tree across the road. So couldn't get to Tofino. So called 911, turned around, went back to Ucluelet to the ambulance station. In the meantime, a friend of his was told about this tree and went out there with his chainsaw and cut a big enough swath for a car to get through. So the ambulance and my friend managed to get through that log, but then got to Tofino at Industrial Way, another huge tree across the road, couldn't get to the hospital. The ambulance knew of a back road that I guess people use to maintain the water system. And so they were able to get around to the hospital. The doctors were already standing by, but talk about a horrible, horrible time to have an accident during a storm. It's just, it really makes you think. And that particular family lives in Millstream, and they and 4 other homes were out of power for 4 days because of where the lightning struck. So not a happy camper, but anyway, everybody's fine. His daughter is fine now. So good endings. Just want to say thanks to BC Hydro for all the work that they did. They brought many crews over from the Lower Mainland to help out Vancouver Island, which was great.
Thank you, Director McEwen. And lastly, we have Director Minions. Please go ahead. No, she dropped. Okay, well.
She sent me a text saying her computer is freezing up, and that's why she couldn't respond the last
Okay.
time. So something's wrong there.
So let's maybe attend to the suggested motion that Director Boyko had put forward, and then we'll go through that, and it'll be seconded by Director Coots. You just want to restate it just so that everyone remembers?
Yeah, I'll restate it. So I'm just on the ACRD website here on emergency preparedness. And what it does is it just references to the BC provincial government for regional risks, emergency plan, emergency kit, and the motion will be to expand upon that because our power outages are becoming more and more frequent. And if they go more than 72 hours, we're going to have life and death risks. So expand upon it to make sure people have a source of heat, whether that is a wood stove or propane stove or something else, a generator, so that they can keep in Tokort's case, they can actually use that to heat their houses by having electric heaters, and also be able to keep their fridges and freezers going, spare gas and chainsaws and things of that nature, because with the amount of trees down, this place was shut down dead in the rural areas and everywhere else on the board here. Thank you.
I'd like to mention, and seconded by Director Coots, I do like the mention of other heat sources because diesel space heaters are surprisingly efficient now. So those are the kind of things that truckers have in their cabs.
I would question getting the ones off Amazon for that reason, but get a CSA approved one.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of cheap diesel heaters out there. Just get a good one.
Thank you for that. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Welcome back, Director Minions. Hopefully your computer is not being destroyed.
Thank you. I'm having all sorts of technical issues today, so my apologies for that. Just wanted to really briefly say I didn't have anything specific to add. Appreciate everyone's debriefing, and I recognize that in the city we were quite lucky compared to some of the electoral areas and the West Coast. And I think that we really saw a lot of examples of especially the more remote areas pulling together and really helping each other out in a fantastic way. So appreciate all the work done by staff, volunteers, and really just our community in these times. Thanks.
Thank you. So we've done a motion. We've had feedback from everyone. The only other thing I wanted to mention from a regional perspective is actually interregional, and that's something where we had an EOC and we had help for people who are stranded on this side of the hump. RDN didn't. So I think that's something that we need to have interregional conversations around, is when our citizens and our residents are stranded on the other side of the hump, how are we going to figure out some sort of agreement between us and the RDN, and how do we make the province actually pay attention to the specific issue? Because there are people who work in the PQB or Nanaimo area who live here, and there are people who are and do the opposite as well. So with that in mind, we should be having that conversation, and maybe our voices together can convince the province to really take this seriously. With that, could I have a motion to receive all the verbal reports? Thank you, Director Boyko, seconded by Director Sparrow. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. So I was informed by staff, and they are of the mind that the in-camera agenda items can be postponed to the next meeting, given that we do have some people who want to get some training pretty quickly. I'm wondering if the board would entertain deferring this to the next meeting.
I'll make that motion to defer till next meeting.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Director Boyko, everyone. All those in favor? All opposed? The motion carried. I note that that's more than enough to do that. It brings us into question period. Do any members in the gallery have any questions? Are you sure? Okay. Do we have anything online?
There's no emails and no questions in Zoom. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Thank you, Director Boyko and Director Coots. All those in favor? All opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And thank you. Have a good one, everyone.